Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sarah Starr. On November 27, 2017, at approximately 9 a.m., the Sherry County Sheriff's Department in Alabama, United States, received a call from a witness who believed her friend had taken her own life. Police were dispatched to a home owned by a local church. The home had previously been the pastor's residence, but had recently been rented out exclusively to church members. The tenant at the time of the incident was Sarah Starr, a recently divorced mother of 3. At 38, she had been married for 16 years, but her relationship had hit a rough patch, leading her to make the difficult decision to divorce. Sarah was at a turning point in her life, facing the challenges of being a single parent without her husband's support. She had to take on all parental responsibilities, including providing for the needs of the children since her husband did not help at first. However, without her husband constantly pressuring her, her situation seemed to improve. Life became easier for her. Sarah Starr was born in 1979 in the small town of LBI, Kansas, USA. She is a doting mother. She easily manages and cares for her children. She is a teacher at a local elementary school where she teaches literature. Sarah loves her job. People describe her as knowledgeable and calm, with the ability to engage and inspire students. Sarah's marriage to Jason began in February 2001 when she was 22 years old and had just graduated with a bachelor's degree in education. Jason, who was 28, had recently returned from military service. He had previously been married and had a son, but after facing disagreements with his first wife, they divorced. He was immediately drawn to Sarah's kindness and beauty. Initially, their marriage seemed stable and happy, and Sarah often shared how well things were going. However, there were growing concerns among friends and family about Jason's behavior. Many noticed that he would frequently insult and humiliate her in public. After 5 years of marriage, the couple had twins, then another set of twins, which was quite a rare event. She was overjoyed to become a mother of 4, but Jason was unhappy. The couple lived in a small town of Colby, Kansas, where they grew up, but they decided to move to Alabama. They rented a house in their new home and Jason found a job. In addition to his main job, he started a business. Meanwhile, Sarah became a stay-at-home mother, taking care of 4 young children and managing household chores. It was a lot of work, but she did it well. However, Jason's income was not enough, so Sarah took on a part-time job at a school. This increased her workload while her husband did not provide much support. Sarah found a strong community of believers and became an active member of her local Baptist church. Her easygoing, outgoing personality helped her settle into her new environment. In 2016, she became a 4th-grade teacher at a nearby elementary school. People described her as a very positive and friendly woman. However, behind her cheerful exterior, she faced difficulties, especially after she gave birth to her second set of twins. Jason felt overwhelmed. He often lost his temper with Sarah because of the noise from the children, lack of sleep, and the mess they made. Sarah admitted that she was exhausted by this marriage. She decided to divorce and moved into a house provided by the church for a small fee and began the divorce process. Because of Jason's business, along with the division of assets and child custody, the divorce process could drag on for years. Fortunately, she had the support of her church, which helped her through the difficult times. Although Sarah was a devoted mother and managed her responsibilities well, the ongoing hardships took a toll on her mental health. She became increasingly anxious, frequently arguing with her husband, with Jason saying that Sarah focused on spending his money on unnecessary items and was addicted to shopping. This behavior worsened after their divorce, leading to significant financial difficulties. These made it difficult for her to sleep and she suffered from mild depression. When Sarah decided to move out of the house she shared with Jason, she asked her friends, Dana and Lawrence, a married couple, for help. They later remembered how anxious Sarah seemed during the move. She hurriedly tried to load her belongings into the car but kept forgetting items, forcing her to run back and forth from the house to the street multiple times. This frantic behavior raised suspicions about her mental state. Sarah was particularly worried that Jason might return while she was moving, as she didn't want him to find out and interfere. When Sarah and her friends arrived at her new home, Jason appeared. Lawrence then asked Jason not to enter, and Jason complied. Jason lingered near the house for a while before leaving. Lawrence recalled that when Jason appeared, Sarah was very scared. She was shaking and crying, and she had been suffering from stress and anxiety for a long time. She truly believed that Jason had come to harm her, especially since he had previously threatened her with violence if she asked for help. 2 years later, the divorce was finalized. They decided to share custody of their children. At that time, their twins were 12 and 7 years old. Jason was also ordered to pay monthly child support to all 4 children and his wife, who was still struggling financially. The divorce had a significant impact on Jason's finances. He was ordered to pay $3,000. At the time, Jason was earning over $6,000 a month, meaning the court ordered him to pay half of his income to Sarah. However, she did not receive any of his assets, so she continued to live in the church. Jason also moved out, but to a house near his ex-wife's house, where he now lives with his mother. On November 27, 2017, Sarah was expected to return to work after Thanksgiving, but she did not show up for class that morning, which was very unusual for her. Colleagues were unable to contact her as she did not respond to messages on various platforms, raising concern about her behavior. Some teachers speculated that something serious might have occurred. Consequently, a colleague was sent to check on her. Tragically, at around 8:30 a.m., they discovered Sarah outside her home with multiple gunshot wounds. Police determined that Sarah was likely the victim of a violent attack. They found that she had left her home around 6:30 a.m. to go to work but was shot in the chest shortly after. An unknown assailant had fired a shotgun at close range, also wounding her in the head. Neighbors later informed the police that they had heard gunfire that morning. However, since it was a rural area where hunting was common, they did not think much. In these regions, residents often use firearms for hunting or to deter wild animals. Forensic experts found no fingerprints or tire marks at the crime scene. However, it was soon discovered that Sarah had just gone through a complicated divorce from her husband, which aroused the police's suspicions. Initial witnesses, Dana and Lawrence, told police that Sarah's divorce followed a difficult marriage. During the final months of the divorce proceedings, Sarah expressed fear of her husband, believing that he might try to harm her. Jason lived only a few minutes' walk from her rented home. With this information, the police began to focus on the prime suspect, Jason. He was brought in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Sarah's murder. He was released a few hours later when his alibi was confirmed. He had breakfast at a restaurant with his children, as evidenced by surveillance camera footage and witness testimony. Although Jason was released, suspicions surrounding him remained as Jason had a strong motive to harm Sarah. Furthermore, Sarah's friends and family confirmed that she was terrified of Jason. A press conference was held to update the public on the investigation, during which it was announced that the state governor had offered a $5,000 reward for any information leading to Sarah's killer. A local resident later added another $500 to the reward fund. Unfortunately, these efforts were fruitless. Police asked for the public's help in providing vital information to help move the case forward, but no leads came up and the case stalled for years. The local sheriff's department cooperated with the state police. However, the case remained stalled until December 2021. Police believe Jason was involved in the crime, possibly hiring a killer. He had a motive, as he had to pay more than half of his income to his ex-wife and children. It is believed that financial disputes led to the murder, and although he tried to gain full custody of the children, he was unsuccessful in court. While searching Jason's computer, police discovered a manuscript for a book he planned to publish. The manuscript contained chapters discussing his relationship with Sarah. Jason expressed a strong desire to avoid paying her the court-ordered amount and considered ways to avoid paying her. His writings included many derogatory comments about Sarah and women in general, which added to the police's suspicions of him. Additionally, police reviewed Jason's financial transactions and discovered that between September 7th and November 15th, the year Sarah was murdered, he made 7 transactions totaling $2,600. These transactions were made between Jason and a person named Lily. The investigation revealed that Lily was friends with Jason's brother, Darren, and that they had no further financial interactions. Through discussions with Lily, police learned that Jason had gifted his brother Darren a 2016 motorcycle, which was a costly item. The reason behind such an expensive gift was unclear, especially since Jason did not seem to have the financial means to afford it. He defended his actions by saying that he had been in an accident, but chose not to report it to the police. Instead, Jason gave his damaged bike to Darren to repair. Darren estimated the cost of the repairs at $5,000. Jason decided to send the money through Darren's friend, Lily. The total amount transferred was $2,600, which Jason claimed was for the motorcycle repairs. However, police suspect that this may actually have been a way to repay a debt to Darren, who may have been involved in the attack and death of Sarah. It is believed that Lily was used to conceal payments for the crime and help conceal their involvement. His brother, Darren, is described as a difficult person who had a difficult life in Texas. Darren has a criminal record that includes a 2013 speeding arrest in which illegal drugs were found. Although he received a short sentence for drug possession, this history has raised suspicions about his possible involvement in more serious crimes. Police investigated the brothers' communications and data, including seizing their cell phones. They identified Darren as the new prime suspect in Sarah's case. He traveled to Alabama just before Thanksgiving 2017. Darren arrived in the area on November 18th and stayed for 10 days, often staying near Sarah's home. Darren's location was tracked, showing he was near the church and turned off his mobile phone around midnight, just before Sarah's murder. This behavior suggested he was watching the Sarah and trying to hide his location from the police. His phone was back on around 10 a.m. the next day, back in Texas. Later that day, he sent Jason a coded message about a successful deer hunt, indicating they were using coded language to communicate. One of Sarah's neighbors reported seeing a motorcycle that looked like Jason's near her house several times before the murder. Shortly after the crime, the same motorcycle was spotted leaving the area, which added to the evidence. Based on this information, police determined that Jason had hired Darren to kill his ex-wife, leading to serious charges against both men. In December 2021, Jason requested a lawyer and denied any involvement in the crime, confidently asserting that the police would have no evidence against him. However, he later confessed to killing Sarah, repeatedly stating that he was guilty. Despite his confession, he was released on bail pending a hearing, requiring him to wear an ankle monitor. His trial is set for June 27, 2022. Darren's situation was quite complex. He went into hiding, prompting a nationwide FBI manhunt. His photo was widely distributed, and initially, a $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, which later increased to $22,500. On February 5, 2022, Darren turned himself in Texas. He chose not to plead guilty and waived his right to wait for the hearing while under house arrest, instead opting to stay in prison until the trial started. Throughout this period, Jason and Darren frequently spoke on the phone, but their conversations were monitored, and they did not discuss anything that could be used against them. The preparation of the case was delayed because there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, but not enough direct evidence. After the police completed their investigation, on September 11, 2023, the trial of Jason Starr and Darren Starr finally began. The prosecution aimed to determine Jason's financial motive, emphasizing that he did not want to pay more than half of his income to Sarah. They presented substantial circumstantial evidence, including Jason's contact with Darren's brother in Texas, his use of his motorcycle to travel to Alabama, and the transfer of money. Lily claimed that she was not involved in any wrongdoing. According to her statement, she was unaware of what Jason and Darren were doing and was surprised to learn she could be seen as being an accomplice to the crime. Eventually, it was decided not to pursue any charges against Lily. The attorney pointed out that there was a lack of strong evidence. There was no murder weapon found and there were no witnesses to the attack in person or recorded on surveillance cameras. Jason's computer notes appear to be an expression of his emotions and frustration after losing custody of his children and facing significant financial burdens. These notes reflected his emotional state and not any intent to kill. Therefore, none of this could be considered direct evidence of a desire to kill. During the 10 days Darren was in Alabama, the brothers did not speak to each other. They may have used disposable phones purchased online to communicate. The lack of any physical evidence at the scene of the massacre, such as shoe prints, fingerprints, DNA, or even motorcycle tire tracks. In addition, the lawyer also presented a video showing Jason having breakfast with his children in a restaurant 10 kilometers from Sarah's house, which happened at the same time the attackers shot Sarah. Jason fully cooperated with the investigation from the beginning by allowing police to search his cell phone and computer. His attorney highlighted this point, trying to convince the jury that a true criminal would never allow such a search, especially if they knew about the evidence against them. However, this argument was not convincing, especially given Jason's behavior and his confession after his arrest. The trial lasted 6 days. The jury then spent 6 hours deliberating their verdict. Ultimately, the jury decided that Jason Starr and Darren Starr were guilty of murder and conspiracy to murder. On January 4, 2024, both were sentenced to life in prison without parole and ordered to pay a $25,000 fine. Darren's attorney later announced plans to appeal the verdict, while Jason's defense attorney remained silent on the matter due to Jason's confession to the murder. The children were placed in the care of Sarah's parents. In court, the older twin expressed a desire to cut ties with their father, stating that they no longer wanted to see him. The case of Kaylee Sawyer. Kaylee Sawyer was born on March 2, 1993, in Bend, Oregon. At 23, she is a smart, cheerful, and optimistic young woman. She knows how to cherish every moment in life. She lives with her boyfriend, Cameron Reemhofer, in an apartment near their college. They appeared to be the perfect couple, and Cameron really likes Kaylee's parents. Initially, Kaylee aspired to be a photographer and found some success in that area. However, she later took a job as an administrator at a dental clinic, where she showed her best abilities, as she knows how to approach each patient and make them feel comfortable, even if they are nervous about going to the dentist. While working at the clinic and observing the dentists, she realized that she wanted to become a dentist herself. She felt this was her big opportunity, as people trusted her and felt comfortable seeking dental treatment from her. On Saturday evening, July 23, 2016, Kaylee attended a bachelorette party in the city center with a friend and a few co-workers. They had fun dancing, congratulating a colleague and drinking. Since most attendees were middle-aged, the party ended early, around 10:30 p.m. However, Kaylee and a few other young women decided to go to another bar, where they kept drinking, dancing, and having a great time. At the bar, a man began flirting with Kaylee, and Cameron's friend noticed. Friend sent a message to Cameron, letting him know that Kaylee was there with another guy, which made he angry. After midnight, Kaylee, feeling tired and quite drunk, called Cameron to pick her up. Although he was upset with her, but he went to get her right away. Kaylee was at a restaurant with some friends when he arrived. On the way home, they argued because Kaylee had been drinking heavily and talking to another man. When they reached home, a frustrated Cameron got out of the car and went straight to the apartment. Upset from their argument, she stayed in the car to collect her thoughts. After 10 minutes, when she didn't come inside, Cameron received a text from her. She apologized for her behavior and said goodbye, leaving he confused. He quickly ran to the car, but when he got there, the front passenger door was wide open, and she was gone. He called her, and she told him she was out for a walk. She also mentioned that her phone was low on battery, and then the call disconnected. Cameron believed that Kaylee had gone to her friend's house, which was 6 kilometers from campus. He got in his car and drove to her friend's location. Despite he drove slowly and looked around to find her, but he did not see her anywhere. That night, he could not locate her, and her phone went unanswered. He thought she might be out with friends and expected her to return home the next morning. He returned to their apartment and went to bed. However, when he woke up the next morning, there were still no calls from her. And her phone went directly to voicemail. He grew concerned, as this behavior was unusual for Kaylee. Cameron reached out to Kaylee's family to see if they had any information. Her parents told him that she hadn't called them either, but they also believed she could have stayed overnight with friends and would return soon. Cameron then contacted all her friends and co-workers, but no one knew her whereabouts. Growing increasingly worried, he decided to report her missing to the police. When the police arrived, they listened to Cameron's account, but they suggested she would likely return shortly. As a result, the police were in no hurry to search for her. Kaylee did not return home the next day and she missed work. She was a responsible employee who never skipped a day, so it became apparent that something was wrong. The police launched a search for her. Cameron's behavior was odd and caused suspicion. He had shown jealousy towards another man and left in his car to look for her. Her phone suddenly ran out of battery. And Cameron was the last person to have seen her, so he became the primary suspect. Then, he was called in for questioning. During the interrogation, he stuck to his story and cooperated with the investigation by allowing a search of his apartment and car without a warrant. He also took part in the search for Kaylee. Cameron passed a lie detector test, so all charges against him were dropped. The police suspected a man who had flirted with Kaylee might be connected to her disappearance. They began investigating to identify him, seeking witnesses who have seen their interaction or had contact information for him. They eventually located the man, but he was intoxicated that night and couldn't recall many details. He didn't remember Kaylee's name or her phone number and claimed he had not seen her again. The police visited the homes of Kaylee's friends and relatives to check if she had been with them. They only found her car, which she had left at a friend's bachelorette party. This suggested that she had not returned for her car, making it unlikely she had gone elsewhere. Unable to trace her phone, police checked the route she may have taken that night for clues. They looked for signs of a struggle, blood, or surveillance camera footage, but found nothing. Meanwhile, Cameron, along with Kaylee's parents and friends, distributed flyers with her photo throughout the city and shared information about her disappearance on social media. A clue has emerged in the Kaylee case. A rookie police officer named Isabel came to the station with an important story. Her husband, Edwin Lara, who works as a college security guard, had been acting unusually since Sunday. After returning home late from his night shift, he seemed troubled. Eventually, he confessed to she that on the night of Sunday, July 24th, he accidentally struck a young girl with his work vehicle. He claimed the girl was drunk and fell under the wheels, but him unable to stop in time. He also revealed that he hit her body and that her belongings were in their barn. Police quickly arrived at Edwin's home, but he had already escaped. Upon searching the property, they discovered several items: a woman's handbag filled with various personal items and cosmetics, a pair of shoes, strands of light hair, and a large bloody stone. To their shock, these items were also stained with blood. Later, it was confirmed that the hair and belongings belonged to Kaylee, the missing girl. This evidence suggested that Edwin's account of an accident was false. It appeared he had used the stone to harm Kaylee, likely resulting in her death. Despite their thorough search of the house and surrounding area, her body was nowhere to be found. It seemed clear that Edwin had not just vanished, he likely transported the body away in his vehicle. Isabel did not report her husband to the police right away because she feared for her safety. Instead, she pretended to support him and waited some time before going to the police. By then, he had managed to leave the city, making it harder for the authorities to locate him. When the police asked Isabel where he might have gone, she mentioned that his parents lived in Los Angeles, suggesting he could be hiding there. A police officer traveled to Los Angeles, and on the way, they found his car abandoned. They discovered strange notes inside the vehicle, containing numbers and apologies for his actions. The police examined the notes, but they did not lead to any significant clues, and there were no signs of an accident involving the car. They concluded that Edwin was likely heading to his parents' home. Meanwhile, Edwin's phone was not being tracked, and he continued to commit crimes after his escape. He kidnapped a 19-year-old girl named Andrea. He saw her getting into her car after finishing her shift at the store and noticed her using her phone. Quietly, he approached her, opened the passenger door, and got inside her car. Armed with a gun, he threatened her and demanded that she drive him to California. Terrified, she agreed to drive him to California. During the journey, he told her about what he had done to a girl named Kaylee and even showed her a photo of Kaylee along with news articles about his being wanted. He claimed that his car had broken down while he was trying to leave the city and that he was searching for someone to take him to Los Angeles. Edwin initially considered kidnapping a pregnant woman, but he couldn't find one. Instead, he spotted Andrea alone in a parking lot and decided she would be his target. This was terrifying for Andrea, but she tried to remain calm to survive. A few hours later, Edwin thought she was driving too fast and might attract police attention. He ordered her to stop and switch to the passenger seat, then handcuffed her to the car while he took the driver's seat. Andrea realized her only chance of escape was to gain his trust. Andrea said to Edwin that she understood his situation and mentioned that her car was leaking oil, which was true. She suggested they get another car, hoping he might release her. But it didn't work. They stopped at a gas station and a diner, but Edwin instructed her to remain silent and not speak to anyone, otherwise, he will kill her and everyone she talks to. Andrea obeyed and did not talk to anyone. She just trying to signal through her demeanor that something was wrong, but no one noticed. They eventually stopped to spend the night at a motel. Edwin planned to rape her there, and the girl knew this well. Andrea devised a plan to escape. After entering the room, she quietly turned on the alarm on her phone. As Edwin started to bother her, the alarm rang. He became paranoid, thinking it was a police signal and feared he was being followed. However, Andrea said it was a notification so she wouldn't forget to take her medicine. When he asked about her illness, she said she had a venereal disease, causing Edwin to stop bothering her immediately. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, and she was restrained with chains and handcuffs. He tried to sleep but was overwhelmed with panic. Convinced the police were coming for him, Meanwhile, Andrea hoped he would fall asleep quickly so she could make her escape. Eventually, Edwin jumped out of bed and used a disposable phone to call someone, and he's speaking in Spanish. Although Andrea couldn't understand him, but he told her they needed to leave urgently. They drove away, but soon the car's oil began to boil. Edwin grew angry and told Andrea they needed to find another car. At that moment, Andrea's hopes for escape vanished. She had anticipated he might leave her with the car and he go on his way, but he had other plans. On their way, they noticed a model car surrounded by several other cars and decided to approach it. An elderly man is loading things into his car. Edwin believed this was the car he was looking for. He took Andrea with him, went to the car, and threatened the elderly man with a gun, demanding the car keys. The man began to call for help, prompting Edwin to shoot at him. Afterward, Edwin grabbed Andrea and ran toward the gas station. By the time the police arrived, the elderly man had survived. At the gas station, Edwin found a car with its doors open. They got inside and drove off, but 3 children were already in the car. A 17-year-old, who had just received his driver's license, was behind the wheel. Edwin threatened little boy with a gun and forced him to drive away from the gas station. The car belonged to a family from Canada who was visiting the US. When the parents returned from shopping at the gas station, they found their car and children gone. They were very frightened and immediately called the police. Edwin ordered the children to throw their phones out the window to avoid being tracked. He claimed to be a dangerous criminal and could kill them all. The children were terrified. However, the teenager convinced Edwin that if he let them go, he would be safer. This was because they would make it more difficult for Edwin to escape, and it would be easier for the police to detect him. He agreed to this. So he dropped the children off at the side of the road and continued driving with Andrea. In a panic, Child realized he still had his phone and called his parents. They, along with the police, quickly located the children. The kids were frightened and reported that they had been kidnapped by a dangerous criminal. They mentioned that Edwin, the kidnapper, had confessed to committing murders. Immediately after that, the police chased after Edwin's car. Edwin regretted his decision to steal the car with the children inside. Aware that the police were after them, he chose to record a video on their journey to California. In the video, he apologized for his crimes and made Andrea post it on her Facebook with a caption that the killers are free. As he grew more paranoid, he told she that he heard helicopters, though she saw and heard nothing. A patrol car began chasing Edwin, and eventually, he was arrested. Andrea couldn't believe she was free, but her nightmare was far from over. After getting out of the car, she was also arrested. Initially, the police suspected she was his accomplice and searched her. They interrogated her, forcing her to prove her innocence. After 18 hours, she was finally released. Police in Bend, Oregon are investigating Kaylee's disappearance and are looking for Edwin because he is the prime suspect. They learned of his arrest and went to the California police station to question him. During the interrogation, Edwin claimed that Kaylee had either been accidentally struck by a car. When police asked for more information, he admitted that he had used a rock to hit her on the head with the intention of stopping her from screaming, as he believed she was still alive at the time. However, the police informed him that when they checked his car, they found no signs of an accident. Suddenly, Edwin changed his testimony, saying he had intended to pick Kaylee up because he thought she was a prostitute. This seems suspicious because in that area, there are no prostitutes. It is common for students to return home drunk from parties. But usually campus police take these students home. Edwin then gave a seemingly truthful statement. He said that on the night Kaylee disappeared, he was driving his company car around the university area and saw a young, drunk woman walking. Edwin stopped and offered to give Kaylee a ride. Seeing that he was a security guard, she accepted, thinking she would be safe. Unfortunately, he raped her, strangled her, and then killed her by repeatedly hitting her in the head with a rock. He later admitted that he had wanted to kill for a long time and was inspired by serial killers. That night, when he saw Kaylee on the road, he decided she would be his first victim. He had planned other murders for some time. Initially, he was reluctant to reveal where he had disposed of her body, but eventually, he pointed it out to the police on a map. When the police searched the area Edwin indicated, they found a mutilated body that was unrecognizable. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury from a blunt object. As a result, Edwin Lara was charged with Kaylee's murder, rape, along with other crimes including Andrea's kidnapping and carjacking. He was taken to Oregon, where he faced the death penalty. During the trial, he asked to call his lawyer, but that request was denied. During the interrogation, Edwin confessed to the murder, but his testimony was excluded and was not considered at trial. The prosecution needed to prove that Edwin was the one who killed Kaylee and committed other crimes. However, they have a lot of evidence, including items found in his shed. His DNA was on Kaylee, testimony from his wife, and Andrea's testimony where he described Kaylee's murder. The prosecution wanted to ensure that Edwin would be sentenced to life without parole. Edwin reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting to attempted murder and kidnapping, but he would not admit to rape in return for a life sentence. In the end, Edwin Lara was found guilty and received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Subsequently, Kaylee's family sued the university, claiming it failed to properly conduct a psychological evaluation or gather vital information when hiring Edwin as a security guard. They emphasized that the college had provided him with a weapon, handcuffs, and a bulletproof vest, which were used during his crimes. This lawsuit was settled for $2 million. After the incident, the college began conducting background checks on all security guards, implemented psychological testing, and strengthened their security policies. The case of Marie Robards. Stephen Robards and Beth Burrows grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. Stephen, whose father owned a small insurance agency, was a well-known figure at school. Beth, a talented athlete in track and field, volleyball, and basketball. Stephen and Beth fell in love in high school and married in 1972. When Beth turned 18, shortly after her boyfriend signed a 4-year contract to serve in the Navy on July 10th, they welcomed daughter, Marie, that same year. Because of Stephen's military service, the family moved frequently between different naval bases. This lifestyle was challenging for Beth. After Stephen completed his service, they returned to Fort Worth. Beth often criticized her husband and described their relationship as a teenage romance, but over time, the love faded and the daily challenges made things worse. Additionally, Stephen's temper and jealousy added to the strain on their relationship, causing Beth to file for divorce in 1979. Marie Robards, their daughter, was a well-behaved student who excelled in her studies. She played the clarinet in the school orchestra and took art and dance lessons during after-school activities. Because her father was in the military, they moved frequently, which made it challenging for Marie to constantly change schools and friends at first. However, she gradually adjusted and became more open and sociable with her new classmates and teachers. After her parents divorced, Marie and her mother, Beth, relocated to a nearby city, while her father stayed in their previous home. Stephen lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Fort Worth, and Marie, along with Beth, visited him no more than twice a month. In the 1980s, Beth began a relationship with Frank Rouse, a former Navy officer she met while her husband was stationed in Florida. At first, they were just chatting, but after Beth's divorce, they developed a relationship and decided to live together. After leaving the Navy, Frank became a police officer in a small Texas town about an hour outside of Fort Worth, with a population of about 10,000. Frank had also recently gone through a divorce and had full custody of his son, the same age as Beth's daughter, Marie. In 1981, Beth married Frank, but their marriage soon hit a rough patch. Beth had to work, so she spent little time with her husband and children, making it difficult for them to bond. This problem remained unresolved and became more serious when Marie turned 16. One day, she came home to find Frank in bed with another woman. Marie was furious and told her mother immediately, but instead of ending the relationship, Beth remained calm. During this time, Beth worked in the emergency room at a local hospital, which kept her away from home for long hours. As a result, she rarely saw Frank and did not spend much time with her daughter. Beth did not blame Frank for their distance. Instead, she felt responsible because she believed she should have spent more time with him. However, Marie was frustrated and thought that Frank was not good enough for her mother, urging Beth to divorce him. Beth, on the other hand, wanted to handle her own relationships and asked Marie not to interfere. As she grew older, Marie began to distance herself from her family. She often argued with Frank and pointed out his shortcomings. Eventually, Beth had to choose between Marie and Frank. Marie declared that if Beth did not divorce him, she would leave the house. Beth disagreed with her daughter's wishes. Even though Marie started packing, Beth didn't change her mind. She decided that Marie should stay with her maternal relatives in Fort Worth instead of going to her biological father's house. Beth contacted these relatives, who assisted Marie in enrolling in a new school. Marie moved, but after only 5 days in Fort Worth, she had spent all her money and wanted to return home to her mother. At this time, Frank's son chose to live with his biological mother, but soon became unhappy and wanted to return. However, Frank refused to let him return. Now, Marie was faced with a similar situation, and she was not allowed to return home either. The rule that if someone left home, they could not return, created a lot of tension. Beth felt that Frank was forcing her to choose between him and Marie. Many people supported Frank's stance, believing that children should not have a back-and-forth relationship with their parents, as this led to conflict and problems. Frank was steadfast in his beliefs and wanted to prevent such problems. He thought he was promoting discipline and trying to avoid constant chaos and tension. It is important to note that Frank was a former military man, known for his decisiveness and discipline. Marie had to accept the situation. At this point, she had lost respect for Frank because of his affair, but after recent events, she had come to hate Frank. Marie left Fort Worth and moved into a rented apartment. Meanwhile, Beth tried to convince her husband to let them reunite. She believed that this was just a temporary situation and that Marie would return soon. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, Frank was unyielding and never allowed Marie back. Beth felt trapped in this situation. The strain on their relationship led her to seek help from a psychologist. Marie then decided to move back in with her father, Stephen. Marie's decision to return seemed to stem from desperation. Stephen was happy to have his daughter back. At the time, he was living alone and struggling with depression. He later found work as a mailman and became romantically involved with Sandra Hudgens, who lived in the same apartment complex as him. During this time, they lived in a small, cramped one-room apartment. Marie slept on a cot in the kitchen. Steve realized that his daughter was struggling, so he tried to cheer her up. He took her to the movies and outings regularly. However, Sandra felt that these efforts did not make much of a difference. Marie's academic performance declined, and she frequently called Beth, asking to come home. She missed her mother's love and attention. Marie was unhappy with her father's cooking and cleaning and sometimes cried on the phone, begging to come home. She expressed her dislike of the new school and complained about her father's small living space. Marie is confused as to why her mother favors Frank over her and feels that her mother will not stand up to him. Beth, her mother, explained that she felt helpless because her husband would not let her visit Marie. Marie eventually began to write in her diary about her thoughts of ending her life. When her father found out about this, he was very worried and immediately informed Beth. It turns out Marie exaggerated her emotions to get attention. As the months passed, things stabilized. Marie seemed to be adjusting. Her grades improved significantly. She was able to connect with her classmates and everything seemed to be back to normal. Marie's emotions stabilized as well. She had completely adapted to her new environment. According to Sandra, Marie never had any conflicts with her father, was respectful to him and remained calm. Stephen did his best to support her. However, behind Marie's calm exterior, there was something darker. After 3 years, Marie moved back in with her father. On February 18th, Stephen ordered Mexican food for dinner. After the meal, he planned to attend a church service. About an hour later, Stephen returned to his apartment complex, complaining of severe stomach pain and feeling very unwell. Maria, along with Sandra, went to check on him after hearing that he was unwell. When they arrived, Stephen was in pain, shaking, foaming at the mouth, and having difficulty breathing. The ambulance arrived shortly after, but it was too late. They tried to insert a breathing tube, but his airway had closed. Stephen was rushed to the hospital, but he died on the way. Maria was in shock, staring at her father and trying to hide her emotions from Sandra. She had no idea what had really happened, because Stephen's death was not an accident. Hours after the incident, Frank and Beth learned that Stephen was dead. They had to take Marie home, something she had wanted for a long time. After an autopsy, the medical examiner concluded that Stephen had died of a heart attack, identifying symptoms such as chest pain, nausea, and difficulty breathing. The case seemed straightforward and that Stephen's death was due to a heart attack. He did not perform toxicology tests. Even if they wanted to run those tests, the lab didn't have the equipment needed to detect the poison in Stephen's blood. After the burial, Maria stayed by her father's grave, remaining in shock even after everyone else had left. Following the funeral, her mother Beth approached her, visibly upset, and shared her plans to break up with Frank and move to Panama City, Florida, with Maria. However, Maria began to have difficulty breathing in panic, and it took her a long time to calm down. Beth believed that Maria's grief was due to the death of her father Stephen, unaware of the deeper issues at play. Marie and Beth then moved to Panama City. Beth found a job as a clerk at the Department of Motor Vehicles and enrolled her daughter in school. Things seemed to improve, but Marie continued to struggle with depression. Her mother suspected that this was related to her father's death. Beth blamed herself for what had happened. As a high school senior, Marie saw a psychologist who diagnosed her with major depression. Marie's mother recalled the serious problems Stephen had faced and was concerned that his mental health problems might be affecting Marie. To help Marie cope with her depression, she sought the help of a psychiatrist. Things changed when Frank came to Panama City hoping to reconcile with Beth, believing that he needed to devote more time to their marriage and change his attitude towards raising their children. Surprisingly, Beth forgave her unfaithful husband once again. Marie was surprised by her mother's decision. She expressed her unwillingness to live with Frank, who had been unfaithful to Beth, and said that she missed Texas and wanted to live with her mother without any men. However, Beth decided to move in with Frank. In response, Marie contacted her grandfather, Jim, and asked if she could live with him in Mansfield. The family agreed, and Marie moved in with her grandfather. Marie became an outstanding granddaughter, an excellent student, and very polite. She was deeply engaged in the lives of her family and friends. Marie continued to pursue her passion for art and showed interest in journalism. She was intelligent and attractive, yet she dressed simply and never acted impulsively. She always returned home on time, didn't drink at parties, and avoided dating, even though many boys showed interest in her. Eventually, Marie formed a friendship with one of the most popular girls at school, Stacy. Stacy believed that Marie had gone through something traumatic, though she could not fathom how severe it truly was. In January 1994, Marie and Stacy spent the night together, studying Shakespeare's Hamlet. As Stacy read the part about poisoning, Marie suddenly looked pale and unwell. Concerned, Stacy asked her what was wrong. At first, she thought Marie might be upset about the possibility of pregnancy, but Marie denied it. Stacy then asked Marie if she had crashed her grandfather's car, but she shook her head in response. Stacy joked, "You didn't kill anyone, did you?" Marie became quiet and then asked an unusual question. She wanted to know how her friend felt about such events happening in real life. Stacy paused to think. Marie attempted to stand up from the couch, but quickly collapsed back in tears, confessing that she had poisoned her father. Overwhelmed by her emotions, she could no longer contain her guilt. The Marie then recounted the story of the murder. She explained that in early February 1993, during a chemistry class, she had poured a substance from a bottle into a napkin, which she later put in her backpack. That evening, she added a bit of poison to her father's meal, and subsequently she endured a long struggle with guilt over her actions. After Marie confessed, she pleaded with Stacy to keep it a secret. Marie had only shared this information with Stacy. She revealed that she had access to a deadly poison that is nearly impossible to detect. This poison can quickly cause a heart attack, leading to death that appears natural. However, Marie claimed she was unaware of its lethal potential at the time. She only wanted her father to become ill so that her mother would care for her. Stacy eventually told her mother everything, and they were both shocked. The mother contacted the Poison Control Center to inquire if the substance could be fatal. The lab technician sensed something was off and declined to provide an answer. The mother then hung up the phone. Marie felt lost and unsure of what to do. At first, she kept it a secret. She struggled with her feelings for a long time, but eventually convinced herself that it was just a cruel prank. Stacy suggested that Marie talk to a psychologist or a priest to share her feelings. However, things did not improve. In February 1994, on the first anniversary of Stephen's death, Jim took Marie and her friend Stacy out to dinner. As Jim raised a glass in remembrance, both girls burst into tears. For several weeks, Stacy was tormented by feelings of guilt and nightmares until she finally decided to reach out to the school counselor and confided in her friend. Although it sounded strange, her friend took the matter seriously and contacted the police, hoping to find answers. The police lab did not have the necessary equipment to investigate the results, making everything futile. Stacy also began to distance herself from Marie. She wanted to avoid all contact with Marie. Their friendship eventually fell apart. Meanwhile, Marie believed that everything had been forgotten, unaware that there was an investigation going on. In October 1994, a Fort Worth police officer contacted Stacy, saying that the toxicology results were back. They revealed that Stephen Robards had indeed been poisoned. He had received a dose 250 times higher than the fatal dose, suggesting that it was premeditated murder. Marie was arrested while studying at the University of Texas at Austin, where many people considered her sweet and harmless. She confessed immediately. Marie said that she never intended to kill her father. She just wanted to make him sick so she could reunite with her mother. Unfortunately, she miscalculated the dose and accidentally caused Stephen's death. Many people found it hard to believe that Marie could have done such an act, and some even blamed her mother for the situation. They believed that her mother's abandonment had caused Marie distress. They felt that Marie was not supposed to be with her mother, which caused her to take drastic actions to get her attention. Marie first appeared in court for a preliminary hearing on October 28, 1994, but she was released on bail and placed in the custody of her mother. A major issue now is whether Marie should be treated as a minor or an adult. Since she was 17 at the time of poisoning her father and is legally considered a minor. On March 30, 1995, Marie Robards was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. It was decided that she would be tried as an adult. Her mother posted $10,000 bail, allowing Marie to move back in with Frank and Beth while she awaited her trial. She was 19 at the time. Marie's mother used the money Marie received from Stephen's life insurance policy, totaling $60,000, to hire 2 experienced attorneys from Fort Worth. Their defense strategy was based on the argument that Marie wanted her father sick, but did not intend to kill him. Her goal was simply to get back to her mother. The prosecutor's office argued that the actions were motivated by malicious intent, particularly due to the insurance money that Marie received. In this case, the prosecution suggested pressing charges for first-degree murder. Testifying for the prosecution was Marie's best friend, Stacy, who provided details about the emotional state of the Marie. The defense called a psychiatrist to testify, who stated that Marie was not a cold-blooded killer and was merely suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to guilt over killing her father. Throughout the hearing, Marie sat silently, often covering her face and crying. Although Marie expressed remorse and expressed her love for her father, the prosecutor claimed that her feelings were not genuine. The prosecution argued that the poisoning showed premeditated murder, arguing that a stomachache alone did not justify returning to her mother. Instead, it implied a desire to kill. At the time, a friend of Marie's mentioned that Marie was considering various ways to reunite with her mother. Marie thought that if she burned down her father's apartment, her mother would come get her. However, no one took Marie seriously. Everyone believed that she was joking. Beth felt guilty about the situation. During the trial, she expressed that if she had left Frank sooner and moved to Florida with Marie, this tragedy could have been avoided. Marie's grandfather, Jim, pleaded for mercy for his granddaughter, asserting that she could not have killed the man she loved. The prosecutor asked for a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. It is possible that the pleas of family members for a lighter sentence, combined with Marie's emotional expression, influenced the decision. Marie Robards was ultimately sentenced to 28 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years. After the verdict, the lawyers immediately appealed, arguing that the prosecution had presented insufficient evidence about Marie's mental state. However, in 1998, the appeal was denied and she was sent to prison. In a conversation with her mother, Marie expressed that she did not want Stacy to feel guilty about the events that had occurred. Marie believed that Stacy's actions were justified. Marie ultimately served 8 years in prison before being released in 2003. She had since married and changed her name. The case of Mia Skadhoj-Stev. Late at night on February 5, 2022, a group of young people gathered at a bar. It was cold outside, so everyone was dressed warmly. Mia was wearing dark clothes, except for her white sneakers. The group wanted to have a good time and enjoy the weekend with other college students. And she planned to go home in her friend's car. After spending several hours at a party, they moved between nightclubs along the street until they finally reached one club. Mia danced energetically, even with strangers, and couldn't stop. She drank moderately and wanted to keep the fun going. However, as closing time approached around 6 in the morning, it was time to leave. Everyone hurried out, with many heading home much earlier than Mia. Mia had no one to drive her home, and with the money she had, she couldn't afford a taxi. At the party, she met a 22-year-old man from Aalborg. After the club closed, he waited for her outside. He chatted with Mia and her friends for a while before they all decided to go home. Mia planned to take the bus and contact her friends the next day. However, hours had passed since she said goodbye to her friends on the street, and none of her friends and relatives had been able to contact her. Initially, her family assumed that she and her friends were just out enjoying themselves, and that she was probably at a friend's or boyfriend's house. However, when Mia's boyfriend called, he revealed that he hadn't seen Mia all day and that she had ignored his messages. By noon, Mia's mother was in a panic after calling all of Mia's friends and finding out that no one had seen her since she left the club, and that no one could get in touch with her. Mia was usually responsible and kept in touch, so her lack of response was alarming. The situation became increasingly worrying for her family, especially her mother, who was really scared. It was later confirmed that Mia was last seen at 6 a.m. and since then, no one knew where she was. Mia's family decided to report her disappearance to the police. Although the situation involved a party and a girl who had been drinking, the police quickly began a search. Unfortunately, there were no leads for the investigation. Mia's father drove around the area looking for her, while her mother and sister took to social media to ask for help from anyone with information. They shared photos and descriptions of Mia, including what she was wearing. As such cases are rare in Denmark, the local community came together to support the family, actively sharing posts and information to help raise awareness of the case. The police continued their investigation. They tried to gather information, but unfortunately, the information was very limited. They contacted all local residents in the area where Mia went missing, asking for any relevant documents, especially photos and videos from mobile phones that may have recorded Mia at the party. They also reviewed footage from surveillance cameras in nearby stores and establishments. The situation was complicated by the fact that it took place in a crowded area with many clubs and bars, making it difficult to identify any one person. Police interviewed a young man who had met Mia and was one of the last people to interact with her. However, he had a confirmed alibi because he had left the area in a taxi. Witnesses submitted thousands of video files taken at nearby parties. As a result, police received hundreds of hours of video footage that needed to be scrutinized. It was a huge task, and police spent days reviewing the footage. After reviewing the initial videos, police found no suspicious activity and the statements of Mia's friends were verified. Mia did indeed leave the club at around 6 a.m., chatted briefly with friends, and may have headed toward the bus stop. Meanwhile, the investigation has been looking into Mia's background, hoping to find useful clues. Mia was a lively and kind 22-year-old girl when she went missing. Her family described her as intelligent and full of energy. Mia was studying at Aalborg, the largest university in the country, and was close to graduating from the medical faculty. In addition to her studies, she was an aspiring model and had participated in several photo shoots. There was nothing in her background to suggest that a tragedy would occur. She was not involved in any criminal activities, did not use illegal drugs, and had no history of mental illness. Although her friends noticed that Mia was acting strangely, she drank heavily and flirted while dancing with many strangers, attracting attention with her charm. Could this behavior attract a dangerous person who saw Mia as an easy target? It has been more than a day since she went missing. Police are once again appealing to the public, asking anyone with information to come forward to help locate Mia. They are also reviewing footage of the party that continues to come in, which requires significant resources. All young people with whom Mia interacted that evening, including her friends and new acquaintances, have been brought in for questioning. On the same day, police noticed something unusual in a surveillance camera recording. At 6:09 a.m. on February 6th, the Mia approached a bus stop located 300 meters from the club. It seemed that she was waiting for a bus to return home. After a brief exchange with the driver, she chose not to get into a car and continued to wait for the bus, which then drove away. However, the bus did not arrive. Even at 7:35 a.m., an hour and a half later, she was still standing at the bus stop. It was clear that she was at risk of freezing, as she was not dressed appropriately for the weather. She appeared to be losing hope of catching the bus and felt uncertain about what to do next. During this time, a car approached her. The driver slowed down and they talked. Then Mia got in the car. It is likely that the driver did not arouse any suspicion from her. He had gained her trust. The police suspect that he could be someone she knew from a party or could be an unlicensed taxi driver. Officers thoroughly examined all surveillance footage but were unable to determine the license plate number or identify the driver's face due to the poor quality of the footage. It is therefore unclear which vehicle the girl entered. However, it was clear that the driver was the last known person to see Mia alive, making it important to locate and interview him. On February 8th, officers decided to reach out to the public for assistance once again. They hoped that someone who recognized the driver would contact the police. Officers also spoke to Mia's friends again to clarify the timeline of events. Her friends provided a detailed account of that night. After everyone returned home in the morning, a brief conversation in the parking lot at around 6:20 a.m. A friend who accompanied Mia to the bus stop gave a detailed description of her route. This information proved useful. The police were able to discover several additional video cameras that may have captured footage of Mia and the car that stopped to pick her up. This investigation led to important discoveries. It was discovered that the car had an unusual license plate. Additionally, the quality of the footage was high enough that all the markings on the license plate could be clearly seen. This helped them gather information relevant to the case. On February 9th, 2022, police tracked down the owner of a 2015 Volkswagen Golf who lived a few streets away from a local club. When they arrived at the address, they discovered that it was the car that had been caught on surveillance cameras. Police investigated and linked the car to two men, childhood friends with previous convictions for minor crimes, including a previous incident where they pretended to be police officers at a football match. Although both men denied knowing anything about Mia's disappearance, the fact that police were given 24-hour access to the car under Danish law suggested that they were involved in the case. The two men were then brought in for a preliminary hearing, which had to take place within 24 hours of their arrest. During the trial, the prosecutor presented his case and the evidence he had gathered. The judge then reviewed this evidence to decide if the detainees should remain in custody or be released. This process ensures that the rights of the accused are protected while also ensuring public safety. If someone is deemed potentially dangerous, it becomes critical to act swiftly. By February 10, 2022, it had already been 4 days since the Mia went missing. No one had provided any information about her location, and there were no ransom demands. With every minute that passed, the chances of finding her alive were slim. A preliminary hearing for the men took place in the county courthouse, but it was closed to the public. During this hearing, it was decided that one of the men would be released. This decision does not mean that he is no longer a suspect in the case. Thomas Thompson, a 30-year-old electrician, then agreed to stay. He agreed to be held for 4 weeks while police thoroughly investigated his background and spoke to some of his acquaintances. Thomas was born on June 18, 1985, and grew up in southeastern Denmark. Later, he moved to a small town in Denmark with a population of about 500 people. Initially, he lived in an apartment before moving to his grandparents' farm. He built a career in the military, advancing to the rank of sergeant. After leaving the military, he trained as an electrician. Thomas was known to be a smart, polite, calm, and pleasant individual. The main reason for Thomas's arrest was that he was the owner of the black Volkswagen. In addition, Thomas failed to provide an alibi. The police began checking the GPS system. When they impounded Thomas's car, they discovered that he had attempted to turn off the GPS about 4 hours before meeting Mia at the bus stop. A specialized digital forensics team, using surveillance camera footage, was able to accurately trace the route of Thomas's car. It all started at Thomas's residence, where he drove around the city several times, picked up a girl, and then traveled through nearby towns with brief stops. Thomas spent several hours at Lysistrata and returned 2 days later. This part of the route seemed particularly suspicious. Police decided to use specially trained dogs to examine the area. The dogs found a hair elastic, pieces of clothing, underwear, and other items scattered nearby. These items were aligned in a straight line, suggesting that the owner might have been running through the forest, fallen, or been attacked, gradually losing her belongings. The dogs led the police deeper into the forest near a local village, where they found areas of disturbed earth. When they dug these spots up, they uncovered human remains that were cut into several pieces. Police discovered 231 pieces of bodies, many of which were scattered around the burial site. The body is likely Mia's, as some of the clothing matches what she was wearing that night. All of the collected evidence was sent to a lab for analysis. Forensic experts quickly confirmed that the remains were Mia's. The medical examiner determined that Mia had died from strangulation, and that an electric saw had been used to dismember her body. Most of the body parts were severely damaged, indicating that they had been stored in a strong alkaline solution for an extended period of time. On the night Mia went missing, Thomas did turn off the GPS in his car at 2:14 a.m. However, due to a technical malfunction, the location continued to be recorded every 15 seconds. When questioned about why he attempted to disable the tracking system, Thomas claimed it was because a police officer had a personal vendetta against him and was following him. Thomas only reactivated the GPS at 9:23 a.m., likely after the Mia had already been killed. The Thomas then took her body to his house, where he began dismembering it. Thomas spoke up and confessed to giving Mia a ride in his car. He explained that he was passing a bus stop and saw Mia, who was not dressed appropriately for the cold weather. Thomas offered to drive her home out of kindness. He said that she had been flirting in the car and seemed comfortable, which prompted him to offer her a ride, which she agreed to. They drove through populated areas before entering a wooded area. Thomas claimed that they decided to have consensual sex there, but at some point Mia had a seizure. He said that she accidentally fell and injured her neck, which led to her death. Thomas's story then began to change with each conversation he had with the police. He would suddenly mention that Mia had gotten out of the car and tried to escape but tripped and fell, resulting in her death. When Mia showed no signs of life, Thomas panicked and felt confused about what to do. However, he did not call emergency services for fear of being charged with murder. Having been in legal trouble before, he was worried that the situation would only get worse. Instead, Thomas decided to take the body to his home in an attempt to conceal it. Initially, he tried to dissolve the body in a chemical solution, but after almost a day, it was clear that it didn't work as he had hoped. Next, he chopped up the remaining pieces, burying most of them while scattering some smaller fragments around the burial area. He attempted to burn his clothes from the day of the murder, the car mat, and the Mia's bag, which might have had bloodstains. In the ashes, police found clothing scraps and a tool that could have been used in a crime. Thomas claimed that his actions were driven by fear and desperation. However, the police had a different perspective, believing that the elaborate methods he used to dispose of the body revealed a level of cruelty that only a disturbed person could exhibit. The police believed that Thomas initially intended to harm the Mia by offering her a ride home. His actions suggested a deliberate plan, especially when he tried to disable the GPS tracking. Thomas's persistence worked against him. It took him 2 attempts to lure the Mia into his car. He waited for an hour and a half, looking for the right moment when the Mia, feeling cold and desperate, would agree to get in. Once Mia entered the vehicle, he threatened her, brandished a weapon, and assaulted her. Afterward, he decided to eliminate her to prevent her from reporting him to the police, resorting to a horrific method to do so. The medical examiner concluded that strangulation was the most likely cause of death. Many of the body parts were never found, possibly because they were hidden. This suggests that there was no voluntary consent to any intimate relationship. The evidence of the assault was clear, suggesting that the murder was the result of Mia's desperate resistance. Although there were indirect signs of rape, it could not be confirmed due to the condition of the body. Thomas remained silent and refused to provide any further details. The prosecutor's office reported that Thomas hunted throughout the night and selected a victim, waiting for the right moment to trap her. Police discovered that Thomas made 3 stops in a wooded area, suggesting he chased her by car or that she attempted to flee multiple times. But he was able to catch her and pull her back. During a search of Thomas's car, Mia's DNA was found inside. When police searched Thomas's home, Mia's blood was found, confirming his crime. Police analyzed Thomas's behavior. It seemed that while he was trying to dispose of the body, he maintained his normal routine, except for taking a day off from work. On that day, Thomas attacked Mia but also socialized freely with friends, ordering pizza and delivering food, including many sweets. It seemed that Thomas had no remorse. Mia's relatives condemned Thomas's claim that Mia had consensually consented to sex with a stranger, calling it a blatant lie and disrespectful to her. The investigation found that in 2019, he was caught stalking a student, and that similar incidents had occurred in 2015 and 2017 when he peeped into the windows of 2 other girls and behaved inappropriately. One victim said that one night, she heard a knock on her window. When she looked out, she saw a strange man with his pants down, staring blankly at her, oblivious to the pouring rain. Despite being discovered, he appeared satisfied and quickly fled the scene after she alerted her parents. A sketch of him was later created. In 2010, a disturbing incident occurred when 3 women were awakened in their apartment by a noise and found a man inside. He attacked one of them and raped her before fleeing the scene. The police were called, but the attacker was never arrested. There was insufficient evidence and he was not held accountable for his actions. However, the victims were able to come forward as witnesses to help build a case against the criminal. Additionally, Thomas's ex-girlfriend reported on his behavior during their relationship. She said he was arrogant and manipulative, demanding complete compliance and losing his temper even at minor acts of disobedience. She also reported an alarming incident where, after breaking up with Thomas, she discovered that the brake hose on her car had been cut. Thankfully, this did not result in an accident. But she was unable to prove that Thomas was responsible, although she was convinced that he had done it. A third witness discovered a file on Thomas's computer containing a long list of wives along with disturbing content. Several witnesses described Thomas regularly watching videos depicting extreme violence, including murder and sexual assault. Psychiatrists evaluated Thomas and described him as having narcissistic personality traits, identifying Thomas as a sociopath lacking empathy for others. Despite this assessment, he was deemed sane. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution against Thomas, he pleaded not guilty to raping and murdering Mia and showed no remorse. However, Thomas accepted responsibility for improperly disposing of her body and dismembering her. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that she had died in an accident, but this explanation was unconvincing. Even if Mia had been seriously injured in the accident, he could have called for help, which would have proven his innocence. Instead, Thomas chose to dismember her body without attempting first aid, despite he knowing the necessary techniques. In June 2023, 38-year-old Thomas Thompson was convicted of murdering Mia Skadhosh Stephen. He was also convicted of aggravated indecency with a body. The prosecutor asked for a life sentence, while Thomas's attorney argued for a reduced sentence. Ultimately, Thomas was sentenced to life in prison because he was deemed a threat to society. He will be eligible for parole after serving 10 years. The case of David Viennes. In California, a man jumped off a cliff into the raging waves. A woman who knew him watched in amazement. The jumper was David Viennes, a successful businessman and celebrity chef who owned a popular restaurant chain. What could have motivated such a successful man to take such a drastic action? The situation was more complicated than it seemed, as David was the prime suspect in a serious criminal case at the time of his jump. According to his friends, David Viennes was charismatic, intelligent, and attracted attention wherever he went. David began dating Dawn in the early 90s while working as a chef at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. At the time, he had 3 children from previous relationships who lived with their mother, but he remained involved in their lives. David focused on the future, leaving behind his past problems and mistakes. David and Dawn's relationship progressed quickly, leading to their marriage in 1997. At that time, David owned a successful chain of restaurants, which provided him with both fame and a stable income. They tied the knot in Lomita, California, a small town with a population of 20,000 known for its safety and low crime rates, making it an ideal setting for their wedding. A close family friend, Joko Knights, who ran a small auto repair shop, became someone they trusted deeply. Through their friendship, Joko learned some private details about their lives, including that David had a domineering personality and that Dawn sometimes struggled with alcohol. Dawn's addiction escalated to the point where she began drinking early in the morning, hiding the bottles so her husband wouldn't find out she had been drinking. She drank to cope with David's cruelty. To hide her finances from her husband, she asked a family friend named Joe to keep her money. According to him, she last gave him money on October 18, 2009. And Dawn had saved over $1,000. The following Monday, Dawn did not show up for work. Her car was parked near her house, but she was missing. Worried, Joe asked David where his wife was, and David replied that she had left the house. He explained that she felt pressured by her husband, so she wanted to go to alcohol withdrawal. Joe is skeptical of David's answer. He begins to monitor David's behavior and realizes that Katie Galvin, one of the waitresses, is having an affair with him. Katie used to work at David's restaurant, and she is now trying to replace Dawn. Dawn is still unreachable, her phone is turned off, and her car is still parked at home. This raises the question, where could Dawn have gone without a car? Joe observes that Dawn's belongings are thrown out. After failing to contact Dawn, her friends filed a police report. David kept telling everyone the same story. They had an argument, and she left, taking only her expensive Louis Vuitton bag. It was strange that she left her car behind, since it was necessary to get around in that small town, which had no airport or train station. She would have needed her own transportation to leave. It seemed unlikely that a rich woman like Dawn would take the intercity bus. While investigating David's past, police found out that he was not only a skilled cook but also sold large quantities of weed. He had been involved in this activity before 2009. His restaurant business was thriving, so he didn't need to closely oversee it. This gave him the opportunity to focus on distributing drugs to small dealers. In 2005, David was arrested for drug trafficking, revealing that this was not his first offense. He had been convicted of similar activities in 1993. David worked as a police informant, always available and assisting when needed. This cooperation led to the dismantling of a citywide drug trafficking network, for which he served only 1 year in prison. In 2008, after being released from prison, David got married and moved to Lomita with Dawn, where they lived until the unfortunate events of 2009. When his wife mysteriously disappeared, he asked his daughter, Jackie, to accompany him to the restaurant to help with the business. Jackie helped with the business, while Katie was his mistress and aspired to be Mrs. David in the future. Jackie was 19 years old at the time. David kept telling everyone the same story about his wife, Dawn's disappearance, that they had a fight and she left him. However, Jackie suspected that her father was not telling the truth. Jackie directly asked her father where Dawn was. David shocked her by admitting that he had accidentally killed Dawn and asked his daughter to keep quiet and not call the police. Jackie agreed. Meanwhile, the police began to suspect David. In response, he took drastic action by asking his new girlfriend Katie to send text messages from Dawn's phone, pretending that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. David thought that once the police saw these messages, they would close the case. However, these messages only raised suspicions. This was because Dawn always signed her messages with the nickname Pixie, but Katie made a mistake and wrote the nickname wrong. The police obtained a search warrant for the David family home and conducted an inspection. They discovered blood in the bedroom and another room, but the stains were old and showed signs of attempted removal, making them unusable as evidence. 16 months after the Dawn's disappearance, it was impossible to find proof of the David's guilt. Although the police were almost certain that the David had killed Dawn, they lacked solid evidence against him. The only lead was the blood found in the house, which ultimately led nowhere. Reporters closely followed the case from the beginning, as it was a novel event in the area. This media attention benefited the investigation by keeping the suspect on edge, as people under pressure tend to make mistakes. One day, a reporter visited a restaurant and loudly claimed that David's entire house was covered in blood. This was a bluff, but it had the effect. David became anxious, and the reporter was expelled from the restaurant. The police decided to question David's daughter, Jackie. 2 police officers met her and took a confession from her. Jackie told them what had happened and then called her father, warning him that the police would be coming to arrest him until a warrant was issued. The press learned of the details and published the story on February 23, 2011. Overwhelmed, David confessed everything to his girlfriend, Katie Galvin. He claimed it was an accident and expressed that he did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison, saying that ending his life was the better option. After saying this, he rushed to his car, and Katie followed him. Despite the situation, Katie felt calm, believing that he would not harm her. They reached the cliff where David had left Katie in the car. He ran and jumped off the cliff. Amazingly, the 25-meter fall was not fatal for David. He survived. However, David's body had many broken bones. He was rescued from the cliff by a helicopter and taken to the hospital. If he had jumped head first, he would have died, but fate had other plans. A few days later, he confessed to the police from his hospital bed. He mentioned that the most recent conflict with his wife was due to Dawn's bad habits. She was not only abusing alcohol, but also addicted to illegal drugs. His daughter confirmed his testimony. David explained that their conflict on the night of the incident was due to illegal substances. He came home after midnight, exhausted from working 90 hours a week. All he wanted was to relax, but he anticipated that his wife would return under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Since she wasn't home yet, he locked the bedroom door to avoid being disturbed and went to sleep. Later, when his wife returned and tried to enter the bedroom, he told her to sleep in another room and not to bother him. The Dawn became angry and burst into the bedroom, breaking the lock, and started hitting David in the face. Afterwards, she ran into the living room. David followed Dawn, saw the substances she had, took them away, and threw them in the sink. In response, she acted aggressively and lunged at him. To protect himself, David used table tape to bind her hands to prevent her from moving, attacking, or throwing anything at him. He mentioned that he had to deal with his wife's psychoses this way more than once. He restrained her and left her there until the effects of the substances faded. While she screamed in anger, David just wanted peace and ended up taping her mouth shut. He went to bed around 3 in the morning. In the morning, as was his habit, he rolled over to his wife's side but found her gone. He fell asleep again, forgetting that she was still tied up in the living room. When he woke up and went downstairs, he found Dawn dead. David realized that under the influence of drugs, she had started to feel nauseous and choked because her mouth was taped shut. In despair, he felt that his life was over. But he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he decided to dispose of her body. He carefully packed it and took it to his restaurant. David describes how he used a large vat in the restaurant to dip his wife in water and boil her for 4 days to tenderize the meat. He then cut her body into pieces, put them in garbage bags, and dumped them in a dumpster. When the garbage truck collects the restaurant's food waste, the remains of a boiled human being would likely go unnoticed because they would be unrecognizable. It is hard to understand how this could have happened when the restaurant was open at the time. During the investigation, restaurant staff claimed that they did not remember anything suspicious. The story seemed unbelievable and many people doubted David's testimony. Nearly 2 years later, David, now in a wheelchair, appeared in court. After the first hearing, he dismissed his lawyer, believing that the lawyer was not effectively handling his case. The prosecution suggested a possible motive for the murder. David had previously complained that Dawn had stolen about $200 from the restaurant cash register. During the trial, David claimed that after 17 years of marriage, he would never intentionally harm his wife, especially over such a small amount of money. He found it ridiculous to be charged with first-degree murder for such a trivial reason. David maintained that he had always provided for his wife, buying her expensive clothes. However, the prosecutor portrayed David as a cold-blooded and cruel killer who had planned the murder in advance. The Dawn feared her husband and saved money to leave him, but she ran out of time. The jury deliberated for over 5 hours on the case. David Viennes was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2023 after serving 15 years. Currently, he remains incarcerated but could be released at any time. The remains of Dawn Viennes have never been located. Despite extensive searches at the dump, David claimed he hit his wife's skull and jawbone in his mother's attic, but the police were unable to find any evidence there. The case of Jalea Davis. The police officers who arrived at the scene were horrified by what they discovered. Body parts were scattered on the road, and the girl was found decapitated and missing a leg. Blood was splattered everywhere, creating a gruesome sight. But what had actually occurred? Jalea Davis was born in Colorado Springs in 1991. She has an older sister named Toby Davis. They had a close relationship, like best friends. Eventually, the family moved to Marietta, a small town of 13,000 people near the West Virginia border. After finishing school, Jalea took a job at a local store, aspiring to become an esthetician as her dream for the future. On Friday, November 18, 2011, 20-year-old Jalea left home around 6 p.m. to meet her friend Kristen. They planned to get ready for a party together at Brian's house, where Jalea would spend the night afterward. The girls dressed up, applied makeup, and styled their hair beautifully. Friends picked them up, and they all went to the party and then to the pool room in the park. Although Jalea didn't know the other friends very well, she enjoyed her time with Kristen. She texted her mom Kim, updating her on their plans and saying they were having a great evening. Her last text was sent at 9:30 p.m. The party with Jalia's friends was still going strong. At 3:28 a.m., Toby received a call from Jalia, who was at the gas station. Toby was with a guy at the time and told Jalia that they were coming to pick her up. During the call, Toby heard Jalia ask Kristen to give her her keys, while Kristen mumbled something in the background. Then Toby and her lover went to the gas station. 5 minutes later, Jalia called Toby again, her tone angry and annoyed. She asked Toby to meet her somewhere else. While stopped on the highway, Toby asked Jalia what was going on. Jalia replied that it was not something to discuss over the phone and insisted on explaining in person. Toby could hear Jalia arguing with Kristen, accusing her of being a bad friend. Toby realized that the two friends had argued. Since they were in a hurry, Jalia decided to change direction and go to a location about 20 minutes away. Jalia urged older sister to hurry and yelled at Kristen, calling her terrible. Toby tried to calm her down, assuring her that they would be there soon as she and her lover ran towards them. 20 minutes later, Toby decided to call Kristen and ask what had happened to them. Before Kristen could reply, the connection was lost. Toby and her lover arrived at the designated location but could not believe their eyes. Several police cars had blocked the road. They stopped and asked the police what was going on. The police replied that there was a dead body of a girl on the road. It was an African American woman wearing a white coat. Toby looked at her boyfriend in horror. According to the description, it was Jalia. The police did not tell Toby anything else. In a panic, she called Kim, her mother, and the rest of the family, who quickly arrived at the scene. While waiting for her family, Toby called Kristen back. She said she saw something, then hung up. Toby tried to call Kristen back, but she didn't answer. Jalia's family, who had just arrived, began to press the police for information. Police confirmed that a body found on the highway was Jalia's, and that her identification was found with her. Her car was 300 meters away from where her body was found. Jalia had been decapitated, and some of her body parts were scattered on the road. Her family could see a white sheet covering some of her remains. They were in shock and trying to understand what had happened to Jalia. They had only spoken to her on the phone 20 minutes earlier, so they were confused by how quickly this tragedy had unfolded. A truck driver was driving down the road when he noticed a gruesome scene. Body parts were strewn across the highway. He immediately called 911 at 3:48 a.m. and remained at the scene waiting for police. To prevent other vehicles from driving over the remains, he began blocking oncoming vehicles. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the gender of the victim. When police arrived, they secured the area and began questioning the truck driver and other passing motorists, but no one was able to provide information. The drivers said they did not see anything suspicious, nor did they touch the remains for the victim's belongings. There were no cars parked nearby, and the reason the victim abandoned the vehicle remains unclear. Jalia was brutally killed. Her head was discovered in the bushes alongside the road. One of her legs was severed below the knee, and her right breast was missing. Fragments of brain were found on the nearby fence posts. The scene was horrifying. Jalia was barefoot and completely topless, wearing only torn jeans. Her clothing was neatly arranged on the fence. First her bra, then her shirt, and lastly her jacket. All the items were tattered and stained with blood. It remains a mystery who placed her belongings there. A car was discovered 300 meters from her body, crashed into a fence. Unlike the horrific condition of her body, the car appeared to be relatively intact. It was empty and running, with the doors locked and the headlights on, suggesting the driver had left in a hurry. The front passenger window was open and there were noticeable dents in the car. Blood was found on the license plate, in the trunk on the passenger side, and on the taillights. The police deemed her death suspicious and launched an investigation. Toby kept calling Kristen, who was the last person to see Jalea and had been with her before the incident, in hopes of getting an explanation. Kristen mentioned she had witnessed something, but the calls kept getting disconnected. After the police conducted their investigation, the family members visited the scene and took photographs. They found a boot print in the gravel. The following day, the police aimed to interview everyone who had been with Jalea that night, including Kristen and her friends, but could not locate Kristen. She also did not answer her phone. When police went to Kristen's house, her father responded, stating that she did not wish to speak to anyone and that they would be hiring a lawyer. 12 hours after Jalea's death, Kristen indeed hired a lawyer. She became the primary focus of the investigation, and her refusal to cooperate shocked Jalea's family. They suspected she was hiding something. Otherwise, she wouldn't be avoiding everyone, ignoring the police and her family, or hiring a lawyer so quickly. They also knew that Kristen was the granddaughter of the sheriff and had a history of altercations at a bar, where she was known for her temper, but her grandfather always covered for her. 3 days later, Kristen met with the police alongside her lawyer. She explained that she arrived home at 7 p.m. to prepare for the party. Afterward, she and her friends drove to Brian's house in Jalea's car, arriving around 10 p.m. The party had several unfamiliar faces, and people were drinking and socializing. Feeling bored, Kristen, Jalea, and 2 male friends went to pick up another friend, Katie, and get some more drinks. The 5 of them then returned to the party and continued drinking. Kristen and Katie's friends tried to stop Jalea from drinking more, but they were unsuccessful. Jalea ended up consuming about 15 shots. Initially, her friends didn't notice how drunk she was. She didn't fall and seemed to walk fine. They went to play pool, leaving Jalea at Brian's house. During the game, they noticed that Jalea was very drunk. The alcohol had taken a toll on her, causing her to act inappropriately. She flirted and danced with Katie's ex-boyfriend, making everyone uncomfortable. As the situation became more tense, Kristen decided it was time to leave. They left the pool hall around 3 a.m. Freddie was driving. Kristen was in the front passenger seat, and Jalea and Katie were in the back. They headed home but did not go inside. While the friends discussed their plans, Jalea was on the phone. After the call, she realized she could not find her bracelet and became upset, blaming Kristen for losing it. Kristen had actually carefully removed the bracelet in the pool hall and put it in her bag, but this only made Jalea angrier. Jalea got out of the car and called her sister to pick her up. Kristen then overheard Jalea calling her sister to change the meeting location. Jalea then moved her car and said she would wait for her sister, assuring everyone that she would stay in the car and not go anywhere. The friends then went to McDonald's. This was the last time they saw Jalea, and what happened to her after that is unknown. The police questioned several friends, including Kristen, who agreed to testify about the night of the incident. However, the police found many inconsistencies in their statements. Katie shared a similar story but added more details. After Jalea was dropped off, she went to Kristen's house. Katie heard Kristen talking on the phone with Toby. After that, they all went home. Katie met her ex-boyfriend Chris, and they spent the night together. The next morning, Katie learned that Jalea had died. She stated that she didn't blame Jalea for flirting with her boyfriend because she was drunk. Chris supported her claim, saying they were together that night, and he mentioned that he foolishly flirted with Jalea, who was bothering him. He noted that she was very drunk and struggling to stand, but he didn't witness any arguments between the girls that night. However, He also mentioned that Katie told him about a fight between Kristen and Jalea after they left the billiard room. Freddie, who drove the girls to the party, is the son of a police officer. He said he arrived at the party before the girls at 11 p.m., but Kristen claimed they were already there at 10 p.m. It's unclear who is telling the truth. They might have just misremembered the time. Freddie mentioned seeing a woman arguing with a white man in the billiard room, but he didn't know him. After the party, Freddie admitted he had been drinking a lot and drove them home. On the way, there was a disagreement about a bracelet. He stated they left Jalea in the car while they went to McDonald's. After that, he took Kristen home and then went to his own place. He was unsure how Jalea ended up on the highway. The police found the friends' testimonies confusing, particularly Freddie's, who insisted they had not given Jalea a ride. However, in the last call made when Jalea was on the highway, Kristen's voice was heard, suggesting they were together, possibly without Freddie, or that he was too drunk to recall what happened. As time went on without any arrests, many people started to think the police were not conducting an investigation. They dismissed the incident as an accident. Rumors spread throughout the city suggesting that Kristen and Freddie played a role in Jalea's death. Many people believe that her death did not appear to be a simple car accident. Her car showed only minor damage. A few dents, a slightly broken windshield, and a shattered front passenger window. However, there was no significant damage to explain how her body ended up 300 meters away from the vehicle. It seemed more plausible that she had exited the car and had been struck by someone. Additionally, it was puzzling why all of her clothes above the waist were removed and neatly hung on a nearby fence. To make matters more confusing, police later discovered a removable hood from Jalea's jacket in the bushes behind the fence. How did it get there, and why didn't the police catch it earlier? It was also odd that her body parts were found scattered across 2 lanes of traffic. Due to the extent of her injuries, her body had to be cremated. In 2012, Amber Stafford approached the police to report what she claimed to have seen on the night Jalea died. She said she met Jalea at a pool hall and observed a fight in the parking lot involving Jalea. 2 black men and a white woman. According to Amber, after the confrontation, Jalea drove away while the men followed her in another car. Jalea attempted to escape from them, leading to a chase. Ultimately, the other car collided with Jalea's vehicle, and Amber witnessed her getting out before the attack occurred. Amber's account appears to contradict that of Jalea's friends and sister. Amber was offered a polygraph test but did not pass. During questioning, Amber confessed that she fabricated her story but did not provide a reason for it. As a result, she received a 6-month prison sentence and a $500 fine. In March 2013, the results of Jalea's autopsy were finally made public. Toxicology tests revealed no illegal substances, but the alcohol level in her blood was twice the legal limit. The Wood County Sheriff's Department concluded that Jalea's death was accidental. After her friends left, the Jalea did not wait for her sister, who was about to arrive. Instead, she started the car and drove away. Since she was drunk, she lost control of the vehicle. Traveling at a high speed of about 110 kilometers per hour, her car skidded to the right and crashed into the guardrail. Because she was not wearing a seatbelt, her body was thrown to the right and hit the windshield when the airbag deployed. She was ejected through the right front door window while the car continued to move. As she struck the guardrail pillars, she bounced back towards the car, causing her clothes to fly off. She flipped over the car, hitting the roof and trunk, which had blood on it, before being thrown away from the vehicle. A car may have been driving down the road at night and, in the darkness, failed to notice a body, running over it and dragging the remains across the road, leaving behind many fragments. This scenario seems implausible. Jalea's family did not accept it. They believed their daughter's body couldn't have traveled such a distance. Even if she had been struck by the car, she wouldn't have landed on the hood or trunk. The roof showed no dents that would have resulted from a body hitting it at impact. The police also confirmed that there were no blood, hair, or fibers from her clothing on the pieces of the broken passenger door. No glass was found in Jalia's hair or head, so her family does not think she collided with broken glass on the door before being thrown out the window. There was no significant damage to the fence that the police reported the car had crashed into. However, this detail doesn't explain how the victim's clothes were neatly hung on the fence. If she had accidentally ended up there, her belongings would have been out of order, with her underwear on top. Instead, the shirt and underwear appeared to be intentionally torn. It's also puzzling why the car doors were locked. Typically, when the airbag deploys in this model, the doors unlock automatically, so someone must have closed them. A member of Jalia's family expressed surprise that physical evidence was left at the scene after the police investigation. Clothing, including underwear, a t-shirt, and a jacket, were still hanging on the fence, and no one had collected them for evidence or conducted DNA testing. In addition, the hood of Jalia's jacket, which had blood on it, was left in the bushes. An earring belonging to Jalia was found 5 meters from her body, also left on the road. Police did not search for fingerprints or DNA on any of this evidence. Jalia's car was towed away by police and parked outside without being properly inspected. Another strange detail was that Jalia's favorite keychain, decorated with J-shaped gemstones, a gift from her sister Toby, was missing. Jalia always wore it on her keychain. It was not found at the scene, and it was later discovered that Kristen had it. Kristen claimed that Jalia had given it to her, but no one believed Kristen. Jalia was very careful with her belongings, especially her jewelry, and even argued with Kristen over a bracelet. It would have been absurd for her to give such an expensive keychain. The case of Stephanie Ruggeberg. This incident occurred in 2002 and involved 15-year-old Stephanie Ruggeberg. She had an older brother and was born in Ludenscheid, Germany. In 2002, her mother, Sylvia, decided to move to Spain for the summer, specifically to the Balearic Islands. Sylvia had planned to start a new phase in her life after divorcing the father of her children, believing the island would be a great place to rethink things. Sylvia had begun a relationship with a man named Peter. Before moving to her new home, Sylvia left her 2 teenage children, Stephanie and her brother, in Germany with their grandparents. She came to the island first to find an apartment and prepare for the move in the summer. To help with this, she found a temporary job as a manager at a 5-star hotel on the island, working there during the day. Meanwhile, Stephanie and her brother were excited about the holiday and began packing their belongings. On the first day of the summer holidays, Stephanie and her brother went to Mallorca, where their mother, Sylvia, planned to stay for the summer and return in September. She rented an apartment and moved in with Peter and his children. For 15-year-old Stephanie, this was a momentous event. She was eager to embrace life in Mallorca, especially the nightlife, which suited her age and personality. She loved going to parties, quickly making friends with other young people on the island, and often stayed out late, sometimes not coming home for days. She was often seen in bars and clubs, usually with other girls and sometimes with boys. Sylvia was very upset about the situation. Every time Stephanie returned from late-night parties, Sylvia would worry about her daughter, leading to conflict between them. This tension also affected Peter, who often tried to ease Sylvia's worries. Instead of enjoying their time together, Peter felt the need to address Stephanie's behavior in order to restore peace in the family. At the age of 15, Stephanie faced a difficult choice. She wanted to enjoy her time with her friends on the island, but she also felt pressured to listen to her mother. Although Stephanie understood that her actions were causing her family pain, Sylvia tried to convey her concerns to Stephanie. This caused a temporary strain in their relationship, and Stephanie felt hurt for a few days. Eventually, she realized that her family cared about her and her safety. After a few days, Stephanie began to feel better, and it seemed that her family was mending their relationship. However, Stephanie wanted to enjoy her time off with her friends. Since the summer holidays were coming to an end and she was going back to Germany to go back to school, Stephanie asked to spend more time with her friends during the holidays. In return, she promised to be more responsible and come home on time, respecting her mother's rules. After a few discussions, Sylvia finally believed her daughter's reasoning. On July 31st, 2002, Stephanie asked her mother again if she could go out with friends. The conversation about school quickly reassured Sylvia. Moreover, Stephanie had been acting responsibly for the past week. Eventually, she went out to enjoy herself, promising to be home before midnight. Her family decided not to wait for her and went to bed, hoping she would honor her promise this time. Waking up early, Sylvia stepped out of her bedroom and noticed Stephanie's bag carelessly left on the hallway floor. Sylvia immediately suspected that her daughter had come home late and was a bit tipsy, leading her to toss her things aside and head straight to her room. Sylvia intended to take the bag to Stephanie's room and check on her. However, when she entered, Sylvia was surprised to find it empty. It turned out that Peter had woken up before Sylvia but hadn't seen Stephanie. Now, Sylvia was concerned because she had no idea where her daughter was, and the family began to feel anxious. Stephanie had a history of frequent partying and coming home late. Stephanie would even stay with friends or spend the night at parties, sometimes not returning for days. Worried that her daughter had fallen back into these old habits, Sylvia planned to confront Stephanie when she returned home. However, as the days passed and Stephanie still hadn't returned home, Sylvia's worry turned to fear and panic. After a week of searching for her daughter on her own, she decided to contact the police. During that time, she contacted all of Stephanie's friends she knew, visited their homes, and spoke to their parents. Unfortunately, no one had seen Stephanie for quite some time. By early August, Sylvia had contacted the local police to report that her daughter had been missing for a week. Since the incident had occurred some time ago, the police quickly began their search. They spoke to Stephanie's closest friends and began questioning bouncers at clubs, as well as tourists and bartenders at bars frequented by Stephanie and her friends. However, no one knew where Stephanie was. A week had passed, events were happening every day, and new parties were being held, making it easy to forget details. In an effort to jog memories and gather new information from the local community, the police and Stephanie's family distributed flyers with her photo all over town. Unfortunately, the leads they received did not lead to any breakthroughs. During this time, Stephanie had no contact with her family. She did not use a card, phone, or messaging app, which is very unusual for someone her age. Kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no one had contacted her family or demanded ransom during this time. Coast Guard and helicopters patrolled the coast and waters as part of the investigation. Meanwhile, Stephanie's family continued to search for her body. Sylvia believed she was alive and may have made new friends, but everyone else understood that the chances of her being returned safely were slim. The investigation stalled as no leads were found in the case. Sylvia then decided to take matters into her own hands. She first searched Stephanie's room thoroughly. Although the police searched the room for clues, they found nothing. Sylvia felt she knew her daughter better than anyone else, which gave her hope. Her persistence was rewarded when she discovered a note in Stephanie's diary mentioning a young man named Marcus. He lived in Dusseldorf but happened to be in Mallorca during the summer. It turned out that Stephanie had met Marcus at a beach party in Palma, and several of Stephanie's friends confirmed this. Sylvia continued to search Stephanie's room and found a camera with film inside. She discovered some recent photos taken shortly before Stephanie went missing. She decided to develop the photos to see what they revealed. Meanwhile, the police were actively searching for Stephanie and spoke to the two sisters who were with Stephanie the night she went missing. The sisters reported that they had spent the entire evening going to bars and clubs. The three girls had enjoyed the summer together in Mallorca, spending their days at the beach and their nights at local parties and venues. That same evening, the three friends had a good time before going to a bar in El Arenal where the sisters' father worked. The police later discovered a clue. According to the timeline, the girls arrived at the club around 9 p.m. From the start, Stephanie was focused on the DJ. She impressed him and she left the party with him before returning to her friends. They all continued to enjoy the evening together. Around midnight, the sisters decided to go home, but Stephanie insisted on staying until the party ended because she was still interested in the DJ. Sylvia provided the police with the photos from Stephanie's camera for detailed analysis. Among the images, there was one showing Stephanie standing with a young man. The club staff helped the police quickly identify him as Marcus, a 19-year-old DJ who was familiar with Stephanie. The police then visited his home. From the outset, Marcus seemed very nervous but allowed the police to enter his apartment. During their conversation, he acknowledged that he had seen Stephanie that evening and that they had spent time together. They both left the club around 1 in the morning after his DJ shift ended. Initially, he claimed that Stephanie came to his house after the party and left about an hour later. Police quickly became suspicious of Marcus' honesty when they discovered a missing watch and a dress in his home that matched the one Stephanie had worn at the party. The dress had dark red stains on it, making Marcus the prime suspect. Despite this, he maintained that Stephanie had changed clothes and left the apartment unharmed, claiming that she had spilled wine on her dress. Although his testimony was unconvincing, police did not have enough evidence to arrest him or file charges. They sent Stephanie's clothes for analysis. With the circumstances surrounding Stephanie's disappearance unclear, police continued their investigation, focusing on Marcus. On September 20th, 2002, a month and a half after the disappearance, a witness contacted the police. He reported finding something suspicious at an abandoned farm in the El Arenal area. Police arrived at the site, which was a large building that had been empty for a long time. Inside, they discovered the badly decomposed body of a female wearing pajamas, underwear, and socks. At first, the police could not identify the body due to its condition. Many began to suspect it was Stephanie, who had been reported missing and was being actively searched for. Police collected a DNA sample and compared it with her mother's DNA, confirming that the body was Stephanie's. The police were unable to link Marcus to the murder. Although some of Stephanie's belongings were found in his apartment, there was no evidence that she had been attacked there. The red stain on her dress turned out to be wine, and Marcus's friends confirmed his alibi about changing clothes. So who could have attacked Stephanie? By this time, Stephanie's family had returned to Germany. Her brother had started school, and Sylvia had returned to work. The police decided to investigate Stephanie's family members more closely, having strong suspicions that she had returned home that night, as her belongings and handbag were present at the house. The main focus of attention was Peter, her mother's boyfriend who lived with Stephanie's family. He was unhappy with Stephanie's behavior, which worried her mother. As a result, Peter often expressed his frustration with Stephanie when she came home late or went to parties. The police in Germany brought Peter in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Stephanie's disappearance and death, but he did provide some valuable information. While the family were in Mallorca renting an apartment, they had a neighbor named Torsten, a man from Germany. Sylvia introduced him to the island and secretly allowed him to stay in the apartment without the landlord's permission to reduce the shared rent. For this reason, they did not initially report the arrangement to the police, as the arrangement was illegal. Torsten was worried about potential legal problems, but Peter believed that Torsten was a kind and calm person who would not cause any trouble. Spanish police investigated Torsten, a new suspect in the case. He was living in Uperda, Germany. He was also in Mallorca at the time of the crime. He had a troubled criminal record, including convictions for robbery and sexual assault. Alarmingly, Torsten had left Mallorca. Spanish and German police joined forces to search for him. Initially, they could not find him at his registered address in Germany, so they began gathering information from local residents, especially his neighbors. The police were quickly alerted by a local resident, a 50-year-old auto mechanic. He reported that in February 2003, Torsten came to him with a white minibus. Torsten requested the installation of an emergency light signaling system above the driver's cabin and asked to paint the vehicle in bright colors. He also wanted the windows tinted so that no one could see him inside, even in bright light. Additionally, he asked to remove the seat and create a large sleeping area, similar to a double bed. The mechanic found several aspects of Torsten's requests suspicious. First, he discovered a receipt for the minibus, which had been rented from a car rental service. This raised a red flag for the mechanic. Why would someone invest in modifying a vehicle that wasn't theirs? Second, he noticed a suspicious bag containing odd items. Strange balls, cable ties, several adult toys, and pills. However, the mechanic did not think much of it at the time. He realized that Torsten was planning to modify the car, and the items in the bag suggested disturbing sexual fantasies. The car was later discovered in a nearby town. Police tracked down Torsten, who was quickly arrested and charged with murder. He denied any involvement in the crime. Police discovered what was described as a sex kit bag in the converted car. The kit included items described by a mechanic as cable ties, various sex toys, women's underwear, anesthetics, sleeping pills, and explicit photographs of several girls. 2 bottles of chloroform with Spanish labels and a toy pistol were found, likely used to scare and trick victims into the car. Torsten had purchased chloroform from a drugstore, and a pharmacist confirmed this. When the police contacted the car rental company, it was discovered that the minibus had been reported stolen, which intensified the suspicion surrounding Torsten. Forensic tests on Stephanie's body revealed the presence of chloroform, which prosecutors considered significant evidence linking Torsten to the crime. At home, the Torsten used chloroform to incapacitate the Stephanie before assaulting her. Chloroform is a powerful sedative that can linger in the body after inhalation, but its effects don't last long if the person is alive. Experts believe that Stephanie died from inhaling too much chloroform, which led to poisoning. During the investigation, police discovered a bag containing suspicious items, as well as another woman's handbag in the car. Inside the handbag, they found documents that helped them identify the owner. She was an 18-year-old girl who fortunately survived her encounter with the Torsten. The victim explained that she had met Torsten by chance in the parking lot, exchanged a brief greeting, and then continued on her way. She later found herself waking up in an unfamiliar van. According to her statements, she did not suffer an overdose and survived the incident. Luckily, the girl was able to identify her attacker. The second victim also reported that she was not harmed. She escaped after regaining consciousness from chloroform. At that time, Torsten was absent from the vehicle, allowing her to flee through an unlocked back door and disappear. Torsten has been charged with the assault on this girl, but suspicions around him persisted after Stephanie's body was discovered on an abandoned farm. Forensic experts conducted thorough examinations of the remains and the site. They found evidence indicating that the killer had been in close proximity to the decomposing body for over a month. This was further supported by specially trained dogs that accurately detected Torsten's scent. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Torsten refused to admit his guilt. In order to get Torsten to talk, one of the police officers agreed to share a cell with him. While in the same cell, the officer quickly developed a rapport with Torsten and managed to get a recorded confession from him. Torsten admitted to killing Stephanie but claimed it was an accident. He explained that they met in her apartment after she returned from a party. He had been watching her for some time, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, he felt the right moment had come. Stephanie was drunk and her family was asleep, so he decided to make his move. Torsten began to harass Stephanie, who tried to fight him off. This led to an argument between them. He did not go into details but claimed that Stephanie had attacked him first. In response, he pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. Surprisingly, he never mentioned the anesthetic found in her system. Torsten panicked and quickly moved Stephanie's body from the apartment to an abandoned farmhouse. He stayed with the body, worried about being discovered, until he finally decided to flee to Germany. His story seemed unbelievable because Stephanie had no head injuries, suggesting he had lied about how the death occurred. It was also strange that Stephanie's relatives did not immediately suspect the neighbor who had gone missing around the time of Stephanie's murder. For years after the murder, the prosecutor's office finally charged Torsten with assault resulting in death. The charge carries a 10-year prison sentence, and the prosecutor's office sought the maximum sentence. However, Torsten's attorney argued that his confession had been improperly obtained, meaning the recording could not be used to support the charges. The defense argued that Stephanie's body had been accidentally contaminated with chloroform after the autopsy. While this explanation seemed implausible, it was important to disprove it through further investigation. Ultimately, the accidental chloroform contamination theory was rejected. Forensic experts determined that the chloroform levels in Stephanie's blood were too high to be accidental. It was concluded that Torsten had intentionally poisoned Stephanie to prevent her from reporting her to the police. The prosecutor's office also asserted that Torsten's confession had been obtained legally, which was sufficient to file charges. The Torsten was diagnosed with an antisocial personality disorder and exhibited clear narcissistic traits. His lawyer asked for leniency, arguing that Torsten had a troubled childhood. His parents separated shortly after he was born, and he grew up in a challenging environment. He experienced several abusive stepfathers and was ultimately abandoned by his mother. Frequent moves and changes of schools made it difficult for him to form lasting relationships. Torsten had no close friends and described his relationships with others as non-existent. His mother occasionally reappeared in his life, only to vanish again. The lawyer explained that these experiences negatively impacted Torsten's early life. He had no understanding of kindness, love, or parental care, which contributed to his antisocial behavior. He frequently found himself in trouble and often acted as a bully, leading to constant conflicts. Following the initial hearings, Torsten received a 10-year prison sentence, the maximum allowed. Both Torsten and his lawyer disagreed with this ruling. The lawyer continued to fight for Torsten and succeeded in getting the case reviewed. The judge ruled that the confession obtained illegally would not be considered evidence. The jury found Torsten guilty of premeditated murder and added another year for concealing evidence. The prosecutor's office convincingly demonstrated that the killer had been waiting for his victim in her apartment. She had returned home, changed into her pajamas, and was getting ready for bed when he attacked her, raped her, and then killed her to cover up his crime. To hide the Stephanie's body, the Torsten took her to a nearby farm. There, Torsten lived close to the body for over a month, constantly fearing that he would be discovered. During this period, he took part in all the search efforts, was present at almost every search operation and provided significant support to the family of the Stephanie. All of this was intended to distract suspicion away from him. Until the criminal was finally caught, the family of the Stephanie had no idea that they had welcomed a man into their home who had escaped from prison in another country. He was wanted for multiple robberies and had also been accused of sexually assaulting another girl using chloroform. In prison, Torsten behaved well and even assisted the priest. He completed his sentence and was released after 11 years. Stephanie's family wanted a harsher punishment and were disappointed with the leniency of his sentence. The police in both Spain and Germany, who were involved in the joint investigation, shared their concerns. They viewed Torsten as a potential threat, fearing that it was only a matter of time before he would attack again, possibly leading to more rapes and murders. Torsten is currently living in Germany, but his exact location and identity remain unknown. And he has not been involved in any new criminal activities, at least for now. The case of Rola Paspiragou. Rola Paspiragou was born in 1989 in Patras, Greece. She had a younger sister named Dimitra, who was 8 years her junior. The sisters primarily grew up with their grandparents. Rola was known for her spirited personality and was often described as a mischievous girl. She pursued a medical education to become a nurse, but never worked in that field. Throughout her life, she tried various professions, but her true passion was football. While working as a football referee, Rola met her future husband, Manos Daskalaki, who was a goalkeeper at the time. Rola, 22 years old, was deeply in love with 19-year-old Manos. They began dating, and soon after, Rola became pregnant, and they two decided to marry. Manos's parents opposed their relationship, feeling embarrassed by Rola's unusual behavior and the fact that she was 3 years older than him. However, this did not stop Manos. They got married in 2012. And soon after, their daughter Georgina was born. Like her mother, Georgina also developed a love for football, and Rola took her to training sessions. In 2015, Melina, Manos and Rola's second daughter, was born. Although on the surface they looked like a happy family with 2 children, in reality, many problems still existed within. They frequently argued, and Rola struggled with depression, having attempted to end her life twice without success. A tragedy struck on April 13, 2019, when their 3.5-year-old daughter Melina died. She had been hospitalized with symptoms of a rare form of leukemia, which doctors assured them was fully treatable. Melina has overcome the disease. She was set to return home. Everything seemed fine. On that fateful day, Rola was at the hospital with Melina. The little girl was in a cheerful mood, enjoying shashlik that her parents had brought. However, everything changed abruptly after her father, Manos, stepped out of the room. According to Rola, they settled down for a nap shortly after he left. About an hour later, a nurse came in to administer medication, and just 10 minutes after that, at 4:40 p.m., Melina began trembling, wheezing, and have a seizure. Rola cried out for her daughter, but when that didn't help, she ran to summon the nurses. They rushed to assist Melina, but it was too late. A forensic expert later determined that the cause of death was liver failure and pulmonary edema. The family was deeply affected by their grief. Manos and Rola are back together, and their marriage grew stronger. In 2021, they welcomed their third child, Irita, and they felt happy again, believing that nothing could disrupt their joy. Tragically, just 6 months later, the baby passed away. She passed away in her sleep at their home in March 2021, while sharing a room with her mother, Rola. According to the forensic examination, she died of sinus node aplasia and heart cell degeneration, leading to cardiac arrest. This disease usually occurs in the elderly and is rarely seen in children. However, doctors believe that this is a congenital disease. On that tragic night, Rola's sister Dimitra was not staying over, leaving Rola alone with the baby. Around 7:30 a.m., Irita woke up, and Rola gave her a pacifier before they both tried to go back to sleep. When they checked on Irita at 11 a.m., she was unresponsive. In a panic, Rola called Manos for help and attempted to perform CPR. After several unsuccessful tries, she decided to call an ambulance. An hour later, the paramedics arrived and confirmed Irita's death. Her body had already begun to cool and stiffen. The loss of her second child, Irita, raised many questions about Rola's actions. Why did she not call an ambulance right away, instead of trying to resuscitate her child and contacting Manos? Valuable time was lost, and there were concerns that Irita might have been saved. Rola explained that she was in shock, and an hour later, she realized she needed to call an ambulance. The family was left with one child, their eldest daughter Georgina. Before Irita's death, the relationship between Manos and Rola was already strained, and the loss only increased the emotional distance between them. Their problems are getting more and more stressful, and divorce seemed imminent. Georgina also suffered from many health problems. Just 15 days after Irita's passing, she was hospitalized due to convulsions. The medical team tried their best to resuscitate her, and thanks to their efforts, she survived. However, she was diagnosed with heart failure, which led to the implantation of a defibrillator and a pacemaker. Following this, she was closely monitored by doctors and had to be re-hospitalized multiple times for encephalopathy, the cause of which remained unknown. She experienced seizures, and despite thorough examinations, the reasons for them could not be identified. The doctors decided to transfer her to a different clinic for further evaluation. Tragically, on January 29, 2022, 9-year-old Georgina passed away. This news shocked everyone, especially since she had seemed healthy. As doctors were trying to save the girl, her mother, Rola, suddenly declared her dead. She asked them to stop, saying that it was pointless and that she would not come back to life. She also said that Georgina had endured a lot of pain and suggested that it would be better for them to let her rest in peace. Rola's calm demeanor during this moment surprised the medical staff. A few hours after Georgina's passing, Rola shared a post on social media expressing her feelings. She stated that she had given life to Georgina but was upset that Georgina had left her. Rola highlighted that Georgina brought her joy and was a source of strength in her life. In her farewell message to her daughter, she wished Georgina to enjoy her reunion with her sisters. Rola also expressed that, in her heart, Georgina would always be with her, and she affirmed her love for all 3 of her children. In memory of her children, Rola got tattoos. She got her first tattoo after Georgina was born, and the others were done after the deaths of her 2 daughters, Melina and Irita. The circumstances surrounding the deaths of her 3 daughters raised suspicions. They all died within 3 years, one after the other. In each case, their health conditions appeared to be stable, and doctors were initially optimistic about their recovery. However, doctors were shocked by the sad outcome. This caused many doubts and speculations. Some people believe the Paspirigo family was cursed and that these deaths were the result of supernatural forces. Doctors were skeptical of Rola's explanation for her daughter's death and contacted law enforcement to investigate. The focus was on the eldest daughter, Georgina, as they had her medical records and her body for further examination. Investigators interviewed 20 doctors from 5 hospitals in Athens and Patras who had treated Georgina. A discrepancy arose between what the doctors reported and what Rola claimed. Initially, doctors suspected Georgina had heart problems. But later tests revealed little girl did not have any heart issues. Rola frequently reported seizures and neurological issues, but examinations did not show any evidence of these conditions. Instead, Georgina was diagnosed with gastroenteritis and psychological issues stemming from the deaths of her two younger sisters, and little girl was discharged. However, little girl was readmitted due to seizures, and her condition remained unclear. Plans were made to transfer her to a hospital with better monitoring capabilities, but unfortunately, she died before that could happen, despite appearing healthy at the time. Before her death, Georgina told doctors she felt as if there was a bomb in her stomach about to explode. She was concerned and tried to understand the deaths of her younger sisters, Melina and Irita, fearing something similar might happen to her. She shared her concerns with the doctors at the hospital. Manos and Rolla initially denied any involvement in the children's deaths. They did some interviews and finally cleared the doubts about them. They spoke of the traumatic experience they faced, often using the word suddenly to stress that their children died unexpectedly and without warning, even though there were no signs that anything bad was imminent. According to Rolla, Georgina had difficulty breathing. However, toxicology tests revealed no issues. The doctor confirmed that Georgina had no heart problems and mentioned her sudden death. However, the investigation is still ongoing. It was discovered that Rolla was present with her three children at all three incidents, but she asserted that this said nothing. Rolla declares that she is the children's mother and that she has always been there for them. She didn't understand why that surprised everyone and told them to stop talking nonsense. Manos blamed the doctors and was confused because all tests showed the children's was healthy before his sudden death. He believed the treatment may have been wrong. Although toxicological tests performed after the girls' deaths yielded no findings. They were only conducted for the most common substances. So it was decided to do more extensive testing that would not normally be done. In the case involving Irita's death, Rolla called an ambulance too late. Similarly, in the case with Melina, Rolla delayed seeking help and only contacted the nurses 35 minutes after Melina had died, by which point her body had started to cool. Why did it take Rolla so long to ask for help? A forensic expert observed small scratches on Melina's nose, indicating that there might have been a struggle. In addition, tests showed that the concentration of ketamine in Georgina's body was very high, 6 times the normal amount used for anesthesia. Ketamine is not available at regular pharmacies and is hard to obtain, indicating that it could not have entered her system by accident. The drug was injected into Georgina's body just 20 minutes before her death. The question arises, who could have administered the ketamine if the doctors did not? The medical staff had last checked on her shortly before she died. And since Rolla was the only person present in the hospital room when little girl passed away, Rolla became a suspect in the murder. Later, the bodies of the two other girls, Melina and Irita, were exhumed. While no ketamine was found, but experts concluded that both Melina and Irita died of suffocation, and their deaths were classified as murder. A bloody handkerchief was discovered next to the baby's body. This handkerchief had been taken from the house. Rolla had requested its return but was denied. On March 30th, 2022, police arrested 33-year-old Rolla Pispirigu at her younger sister's house in Patras. Rolla had a medical degree and was capable of obtaining the drug. She knows her actions well and does them consciously. Investigators established that several years ago, she attended seminars related to criminology. Rolla's younger sister, Dimitra, refused to believe that Rolla could be responsible for the children's deaths. She stated that she did not believe Rolla would have harmed her daughters and that if they did not die of natural causes, then someone else was to blame and should be punished. Dimitra confirmed that she did not see anything unusual while in the house during the time of Irita's death. However, others described Rolla as cold and emotionless, suggesting she could potentially be responsible for the tragedy. During the investigation of Georgina's notebook, a piece of paper was discovered that said, "Her mother, Rolla, is very evil." Neighbors reported witnessing Rolla physically abuse Georgina when little girl was just a baby. They informed the police, and the complaint was forwarded to social services, which monitored the family by making regular visits to their home. A message was found on Rolla's phone that she sent the day before Georgina's death, stating, "See what happens tomorrow." This message became a crucial piece of evidence against her. After Rolla's arrest, her husband, Manos, learned about the evidence and became convinced of her guilt, leading him to file for divorce. He was shocked by her actions and don't understand what her motive is. Manos mentioned that she was pregnant at the time of Georgina's death, but he suspected the child was not his since they had not been intimate for a long time. Following Georgina's death, Rolla quickly ended her pregnancy. Manos believed she might have been seeing another man to provoke jealousy, and he also questioned whether their middle daughter, Melina, and youngest daughter, Irita, were his biological children. When Rolla learned about the divorce, she became very angry. She sent a message to her friend, expressing her desire to cast a spell on her husband, Manos, to prevent him from leaving her. 2 weeks before Georgina's death, Manos proposed a divorce, prompting she to consult fortune tellers in hopes of keeping he. Unfortunately, this did not help. So what could Rolla's motives be? Initially, there was speculation that she might have Munchausen syndrome. This is a condition in which caregivers intentionally harm or create health problems for the person they care for in order to gain attention or sympathy. However, this theory was later dismissed. It was then revealed that Manos had a mistress. Rolla was aware of the infidelity and was contemplating divorce herself. She desperately attempted to hold on to her husband, possibly seeking to regain his attention and rebuild the family. Rolla's younger sister, Dimitra, does not accept this hypothesis. She asserts that she advised Rolla to divorce Manos due to issues in their marriage. Although Rolla understood the problems, she hesitated to divorce for the sake of their children. Dimitra found it hard to believe that Rolla could be capable of such actions. A psychiatrist who evaluated Rolla concluded that her thoughts were entirely centered on her husband. She was obsessed with him, exhibiting intense jealousy towards other women. After Rolla was arrested, about 500 people gathered outside her home, expressing outrage and demanding the death penalty for killing her 3 children. At that time, her mother, younger sister, and other relatives were inside the home. The trial in this case is still in progress. Rolla is currently in custody, housed in a solitary VIP cell that includes various amenities. She does not interact with other inmates, and for her safety, she is under constant surveillance due to concerns that she may attempt to end her life. Rolla is charged with the murder of 3 children, but she continues to deny all allegations. She insists that she is a victim who has lost children and freedom. She believes this is a misunderstanding and is confident that she will be acquitted, released from prison, and able to repair her relationship with Manos. She has not yet accepted the reality of her divorce. Rolla's ex-husband, Manos, wants nothing to do with her. He is in a new relationship, planning a wedding, and hoping to have children. On March 29, 2024, Rolla Pispirigu was sentenced to life in prison by a jury in Athens. The jury unanimously found her guilty of the murder of her eldest daughter, Georgina. The court agreed with the prosecutor's recommendation for the sentence. The case of Peyton Luckner. Morgan Geyser is seen as different at school because of her passion for horror stories. She spent her time on special websites and wrote creepy tales in her diary, which left her without friends. Other kids didn't want to befriend her, and she didn't make an effort to connect with them. In 4th grade, she befriended a kind girl named Anissa, and that was her first best friend. Initially, Anissa wasn't interested in being friends with Morgan. However, Morgan was thrilled to finally have a friend, and they started spending a lot of time together. In October 2013, they met another girl named Peyton, and the 3 of them became friends at school. Anissa was a typical student who did well academically and was favored by teachers, leading many classmates to seek her help with homework. Despite their friendship, but little girl and Morgan often clashed. Morgan found little girl aggressive and unpleasant, while little girl felt similarly about Morgan. Then, Morgan and Anissa grew very close due to their shared love of horror stories. However, Peyton didn't like that. She mentioned her concerns to her parents, and they advised her to stay away from friends who were obsessed with horror stories. They believed that Morgan and Anissa were a bad influence on little girl. Despite her parents' warnings, little girl chose to stay in touch with Morgan and Anissa's little girl, unaware of the danger that was about to unfold. On May 31st, 2014, Morgan, Anissa, and Peyton went to the park for a picnic to celebrate Morgan's 12th birthday. Later, a cyclist found Peyton bleeding and called 911. An ambulance rushed her to the hospital, and doctors worked hard to save her life. Peyton had suffered 19 stab wounds to her arms, legs, and torso. The police launched an investigation into the brutal attack and determined that she had been in the park that day with Morgan and Anissa. Morgan and Anissa were all 12 years old, just like Peyton. Because of their age, the police tried to question them gently to avoid causing any trauma. Morgan was sweet and answered the questions calmly and honestly. She inquired about Peyton's condition and whether little girl was dead. When the investigator asked why Morgan had hurt best friend, Morgan replied that it was necessary. She shared that the crime had been premeditated. 6 months prior, they had planned it carefully, but they can't do it until May 31st. On that day, they played video games, dressed up, and had fun, then preparing to go to the park. Peyton noticed that Morgan had packed a backpack for the trip, which contained clothes and granola bars. When Peyton asked why they needed supplies, Morgan said it was in case they wanted a snack. And in the backpack there are also pictures of Anissa's parents and Morgan's parents. They took these photos with them because they weren't sure if they would be able to return home. No one witnessed Anissa putting a knife in the bag. The group first played on the playground, then went to the restroom. While there, Anissa and Morgan whispered to each other. Then, Anissa told Peyton to go into a stall, although Peyton was confused about why. Anissa and Morgan had a different motive. They believed it was easier to harm someone in a dream since a person doesn't resist, making the act simpler. They pushed Peyton into a stall and backed her into a corner. Morgan reminded Anissa of their agreement that she would be the one to perform the act. They hit Peyton's head against the wall and then stepped out of the stall to plan their next move. They returned to Peyton and suggested playing hide and seek, with Morgan being the seeker. Anissa instructed Peyton to lie down in the bushes to hide, which was actually their intention all along. They began to push little girl down, and Anissa gestured to Morgan for little girl to lie flat. Morgan then signaled that Anissa should stab her. Anissa knocked Peyton down to the ground, and then Morgan rushed over and tried to take charge. Morgan insisted she could handle it alone, claiming she knew the weak points to attack because she had watched the movie Doomsday. However, Anissa would not agree, and they started arguing about who was going to kill Peyton. Morgan believed little girl was too distracted by the flowers to hear their conversation. In that moment, Anissa stabbed Peyton with a knife and then handed the weapon to Morgan. Morgan then jumped on Peyton and began to stab her repeatedly. Anissa stepped back to watch as Morgan continued, and afterward, Morgan walked away from the scene covered in blood. In distress, Peyton screamed that little girl had trusted them and that she hated them. Anissa simply told her to lie down quietly. Peyton tried to stand up but was unsuccessful. She fell down and said she couldn't breathe and couldn't see clearly. In distress, she begged Anissa and Morgan for help. Morgan approached she and attempted to clean the blood off her body with leaves, but it was ineffective. Peyton asked Morgan not to touch her. They pretended to go for assistance but actually ran away, leave she there to die. They went to a Walmart, where they entered the restroom to wash the blood off their hands and tried to remove the stains from their clothes, but they were unsuccessful. During questioning, Morgan expressed uncertainty about whether she wanted to see her parents, which might indicate issues at home. Morgan revealed that Anissa had convinced her that Peyton needed to be killed to appease fictional character Slender Man, otherwise, he would harm their families, and they felt compelled to act. Morgan admitted that she understood what they were doing, but she didn't want to upset Anissa. Slender Man is a fictional character, tall and faceless, known for abducting children. Morgan and Anissa were obsessed with him and want to be his assistant, believing they could prove his existence. They fantasized about living in his mansion in the forest, not realizing he was just a made-up character. They were convinced that they had seen him in real life. Anissa was very emotional during the interrogation, struggling to hold back her tears. She explained that both she and Morgan heard voices, which led them to commit their actions. Anissa stated that in December 2013, Morgan suggested they become assistants to Slender Man, and Anissa agreed. Morgan claimed she made a deal with Slender Man, asserting that they needed to kill Peyton to avoid him coming after them and their families. For this reason, they were forced to kill their friend, Peyton. They talked about the case on the bus ride to school, discussing it in whispers so as not to be overheard. They were aware that their plan was dangerous. Anissa mentioned that Morgan brought a knife, which she tucked into her belt under her sweatshirt. This contradicted Morgan's own account, which said the knife was in Anissa's backpack. According to Anissa, all the stabs were performed by Morgan, insisting she did not participate because she considered herself a good person and was too squeamish about blood. However, her clothes had blood stains, making her statement seem unconvincing. They exchanged blame for the incident. After leaving Walmart, they walked to a national park in Wisconsin, believing that Slender Man lived there. Anissa claimed to have seen him. She described him as a tall man in a suit, with no face, just a white mask. Anissa said that on the way, they argued because they felt guilty towards Peyton, whom they left behind in the woods. They began arguing about their actions. They realized that returning home would lead to their arrest. Anissa regretted the incident, while Morgan remained calm and unrepentant during the interrogation. When questioned, they revealed that they had initially planned to kill Peyton while she was sleeping to avoid facing her. They considered taping her mouth to prevent her from screaming and then running away, but ultimately decided against it because they didn't want to involve their families. After the police placed Anissa and Morgan on the wanted list, a passing driver spotted them and reported their location. Consequently, they were apprehended just 30 minutes after Peyton was found in the forest. In a backpack belonging to they, authorities discovered bars, a diary, photos of their families, and a knife with blood on it. A search of their computers and phones, police revealed that Morgan had looked up phrases like how to hide a murder, guilt for murder, what happens if get caught for murder, and can be arrested for murder in self-defense. This evidence indicated that they had planned the crime and researched how to execute it. During the investigation, it was discovered that a student had informed the school counselor about overhearing Anissa discussing her desire to become Slender Man's assistant, which involved killing someone. The school counselor reportedly did not investigate this incident. The police located the counselor, and she denied these allegations. Several classmates told the police that Anissa had invited them to join her plan and suggested killing a friend. However, at the time, they did not pay attention and did not report this. They now felt guilty for not reporting her to the authorities sooner. On Anissa's phone, a breakup message is saved in the archive, has a dispatch date of May 28th. The message said that her final wish for those who cared about her was not to be saddened by her absence. She expressed that she loved them and would not harm them. She wished for all her belongings to go to her parents and sent her best wishes to everyone who knew her. In school lockers, drawings depicting bloody characters, knives, and Slender Man were discovered. After realizing Anissa and Morgan had abandoned him and no one was coming to help, Peyton didn't give up. She used all her strength to crawl out onto the road to seek help, and eventually, a cyclist discovered her. Due to the intense pain, little girl could not speak and could only nod. She was nearly unconscious. She suffered life-threatening injuries, including one just a few millimeters from her heart. Then, she was taken to intensive care, and doctors managed to save her life. Once she regained consciousness, she underwent a long recovery process, both mentally and physically. She often has nightmares about her friends and is always in a state of anxiety. She recalled that before stabbing her, Morgan expressed regret. Morgan stating that this was the only way to save her from Slender Man, who was supposedly stalking her. Morgan's parents and Anissa's parents were aware that their daughters were interested in Slender Man and other horror-themed characters, but they did not see any issues with this interest. However, they were unaware of the deep fear their daughters had about Slender Man, so them to take no action. Teachers characterized Morgan as a peculiar, quiet girl who preferred to be alone, and her classmates often chose to avoid her. One day, Morgan ran through the school claiming that Snape from Harry Potter was stalking her, but others dismissed it as just a fantasy. On another occasion, students saw her in the bathroom with blood on her fingers, which was alarming. A teacher reported this to Morgan's mother, who responded that her daughter had simply been watching too many scary stories. The teacher then advised Morgan to stop watching horror tales, but she ignored this advice. Later, she brought a hammer to school, which was noticed when it fell out of her locker. When she was called to the principal's office, Morgan claimed she needed the hammer. Students saw her in the bathroom with blood on her fingers, which was alarming. A teacher reported this to Morgan's mother, who responded that her daughter had simply been watching too many scary stories. The teacher then advised Morgan to stop watching horror tales, but she ignored this advice. Later, she brought a hammer to school, which was noticed when it fell out of her locker. When she was called to the principal's office, Morgan claimed she needed the hammer for self-defense, and the principal observed that she often talked to herself. Morgan's mother was notified by the teacher about her daughter's concerning behavior, but she didn't take the issue seriously. Morgan's classmates noticed that she carried a diary in which she wrote her thoughts, including unsettling content about death, that frightened them. The teacher raised the matter with her mother again, but she dismissed that. 12-year-old Morgan Geyser and her friend Anissa were charged with attempted first-degree murder. During the trial, Anissa said she felt the situation was not serious, thinking that she and Morgan were merely playing a game. She didn't understand the gravity of their actions until Morgan began to stab Peyton. Anissa stated that she didn't intend to hurt anyone. Her goal was to prove the existence of Slender Man and find different ways to do so. They were scared that if they didn't go through with their plan, Slender Man would come after them, which drove their actions. Anissa and Morgan felt deep remorse for their actions. Morgan was diagnosed with early-stage schizophrenia, a condition that was later determined to be hereditary, as her father also had the illness. She pleaded guilty, but under a plea agreement, she was found not guilty by reason of mental illness. Consequently, she was sentenced to 40 years of treatment in a psychiatric hospital. Anissa also pleaded guilty to being an accomplice in attempted premeditated murder. However, the jury found her not guilty due to mental illness, concluding that she could not differentiate between reality and her fantasies. She received a sentence of 25 years of treatment in a psychiatric hospital. In the summer of 2021, the court approved Anissa's request for early release after doctors confirmed that she no longer posed a threat to herself or others. On September 13, 2021, 19-year-old Anissa was released from the psychiatric hospital. She now lives with her parents and intends to continue her education and seek a part-time job. Anissa is under constant GPS surveillance, and her internet activity is monitored to prevent her from visiting horror story websites. Additionally, she is prohibited from consuming alcohol, using drugs, possessing weapons, and contacting Peyton and her family. Peyton is now 19 years old. She has graduated from school and enrolled in university to study medicine. Although she currently has no friends, but she is dating a guy. The case of Vashti Seacat. At approximately 4 a.m. on April 30th, 2011, Brett Seacat called 911 for assistance. He informed the police that his wife had taken end your own life and that she had also set fire to their house. Their two young sons, aged 2 and 4, were asleep in their bedroom at the time of the incident. Brett was able to save them but wanted to go back into the burning house to rescue his wife. The police advised him to stay where he was and not to go back inside because of the fire, and instructed him to keep an eye on the children. The police were then dispatched to their location. When firefighters arrived at the home and extinguished the fire, they discovered a woman dead. Her body was lying on the left side of the bed, with her arms and legs bent. In a state of anguish, Brett described what had happened in more detail. He explained that his wife, 34-year-old Vashti, had called him to help while he was sleeping on the couch on the first floor. He told her to take their children from the second-floor nursery and bring them down. She followed his instructions in a semi-conscious state. He believed his wife was unwell and that their children in the next room were disturbing her. Suddenly, he heard a loud slamming of the bedroom door, followed by flames coming from upstairs. Worried by the strange noises, he went upstairs to check on her and found his wife unconscious on the bed, bleeding. He held her tightly, but she was unresponsive. When he tried to lift her up to get her out, the flames around them made it impossible. Brett decided to prioritize saving the children. He went downstairs, got his sons out of the house, and put them in a car for safety before calling 911. He suspected his wife had set fire to the bed and shot herself while he was on the phone. Ignoring police warnings, he went back into the house to save her. Covering his face with a wet towel, he carefully moved into the smoky darkness, but the flames forced him to retreat. He believed his wife suffered from depression and dark thoughts, which may have led her to set herself on fire. He felt guilty for not being able to help her, but he was unclear about her motives for these tragic events. Despite her troubling thoughts, she was primarily concerned about her children's safety. This concern led her to ask her husband to take them away before she took her own life. However, the reason for starting a fire afterward remains unclear, and no one seems to have an answer. When police examined the scene, they discovered several intriguing details. They found a canister of gasoline next to the bed, suggesting that the fire was deliberately set. The position of the gun raised several questions. It was found under Vashti's body with the barrel pointing downward, which made it unlikely that she could have shot herself in that way. Police searched through her purse and discovered a note listing various expenses. The first item on the list was funeral, with an amount of $15,000 next to it. Other expenses included a mortgage, a car, and education, all categorized as life insurance. This suggests that the Vashti may have planned for her death and specified which expenses her life insurance would cover. On the passenger seat of Vashti's car, her notebook was located. Inside, there was a handwritten note filled with distressing messages. She can't do this. She can't fight this. Take care of our boys. Be nice to Brendan. Talk to Bronson and support them both, letting them know that Mommy loves them. Every night I take care of Bronson is so wonderful. Mommy is so proud of you. Be a good big brother, Brendan. Stay strong and never lose that smile. I love you both and will watch over you from heaven. Neighbors shared some details about the situation. One neighbor, who couldn't sleep that night and was watching TV, reported hearing gunshots around 3:15 a.m. She noted that Brett didn't call 911 until 3:57 a.m., which raised questions about why he waited 42 minutes to seek help. Vashti's body was sent for an autopsy. A forensic pathologist determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and confirmed that her death was not due to fire or smoke, as these occurred later. She had additional gunshot wounds to her chest and thighs. A toxicology report found no signs of alcohol or illegal substances in her system. A few days after Vashti's death, a funeral was held in front of the house where the fire had started. Family, friends, and local residents attended the ceremony. While Vashti's loved ones reflected on her life, her siblings, Kathleen and Rich, harbored doubts about what had really happened. They suspected Brett, and Kathleen quickly dismissed Brett's explanation as improbable. Kathleen, Rich, and Vashti lived in different states but remained close, frequently calling and visiting each other. Their loved ones were aware of the issues and conflicts in Vashti's marriage. Brett's comments after his wife's death were shocking. A large portrait of Vashti hung over the fireplace in their home. When her sister approached the photo to offer her condolences, Brett looked at Kathleen with irritation and expressed that he didn't want to discuss his wife. This response surprised the family members. Upon hearing about Vashti's death, her brother and sister contacted the county sheriff, insisting that she could not have taken her own life. They urged the police to treat the case as a potential murder and conduct a thorough investigation. The Rich and Kathleen closely observed the Brett's actions and shared valuable information with the police. By this point, the police, who sensed something was seriously wrong with the case, had begun to look more deeply into the lives of the Brett and Vashti. They appeared to be a happy couple who had been together for many years. They started dating in school, where Vashti was known as the school beauty and Brett was a promising athlete excelling in wrestling. They were very much in love and got married after a few years of dating. The couple held their wedding in Belize in 2004 and later settled in Brett's hometown of Kingman, Kansas, a small, friendly town with a population of just 3,000. There, they bought a house and started a family, welcoming 2 sons. At the time of the tragedy, their eldest son, Brendan, was 4 years old, and their youngest, Bronson, was 2. Friends and neighbors viewed the family as exemplary, unaware of the issues they faced behind the closed doors of the family. Brett often praised his wife to friends, yet he had concerns about her excessive dedication to her job in the HR department of an advertising agency. She frequently worked late, which bothered him. He struggled to understand why she felt the need to work so much, especially since he earned a decent income as a police academy instructor and could support the family comfortably. In contrast, Vashti valued her independence and wanted to help with the family finances. She was successful in her career and truly enjoyed her work. Brett believed that Vashti's emotional struggles were heavily influenced by her work-related fatigue. She was experiencing burnout and depression, feeling that life had lost its meaning. It was revealed that her boss had been concerned about her health prior to the tragedy and discovered she had hormonal imbalances. Vashti was prescribed hormonal supplements intended to help her lose weight naturally. But these medications have side effects, including fatigue, irritability, and anxiety, which may have contributed to her depression. Vashti's relatives said she suffered from depression. She had recently started seeing a psychologist, and after November 2010, she and her husband began attending family counseling to address the problems in their troubled marriage. Vashti had changed a lot. Previously a cheerful and sociable leader, she had become withdrawn and sad. It is possible that her emotional state contributed to her decision to end her life. However, new developments soon came to light. As her marriage struggled, she considered divorcing Brett. Family counseling sessions were ineffective and their list of grievances only grew longer. Frequent arguments took place, pushing their relationship to the brink of collapse. Vashti's relatives said that she often spent time alone and sometimes went out with friends just to avoid being at home and seeing Brett. Despite this, she and Brett continued to attend family counseling, and she also had separate sessions with the same therapist. However, Vashti's relatives could not accept that she would choose to die. They believed that she loved life, her children, and her family too much to take such a drastic step. Although there were challenges in the marriage and feelings of depression, they were not overwhelming. Additionally, they found it hard to believe that she could have started a fire in the house, putting her young children's lives at risk and leaving them without shelter. This idea seemed illogical to them. How could a loving and caring mother do something like that to her sons? Relatives shared that she would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock to prepare nutritious breakfasts for her children. She avoided store-bought baby food, choosing instead to make her own purees from fresh vegetables and cook wholesome porridge for them. When she learned that a boy in kindergarten had been diagnosed with cancer, she took it upon herself to support his family by raising funds for his treatment. She baked pancakes, sold them, and donated the proceeds to the boy's family. Everyone around her was convinced that such a mother would never abandon her children. Police considered both accounts of the incident. They considered the possibility that Brett might have been involved in the case. Police reviewed Brett's call. When they called 911, they found that Brett's voice sounded cold, emotionless, and distant, which gave the police the impression that he didn't care. According to the investigation, the police discovered that Brett isolated Vashti and the children from relatives and friends, limited communication, and considered his wife and children as his property. Vashti could only talk to family and friends when he was at work. Otherwise, he would get angry if anyone called her in his presence. The Brett exerted complete control over his family. The Kathleen described Brett as a narcissist and an abuser. He was strict not only with his wife, but also with his sons. The Brett believed that even at a young age, boys needed to be treated harshly to become strong men. He never allowed his children to show weakness and often resorted to physical punishment. Brett trained them from an early age and taught them to fight. His harsh parenting methods caused tension within the family, contributing to the breakdown of the marriage. Finally, Vashti felt it was time to leave. A few days before the tragedy, Vashti met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. She wanted custody of the children, but was open to them spending weekends with their father under her supervision. Although she was sad about the divorce, she would be free from Brett control for a long time. He had been controlling her since the beginning of their relationship. Vashti had big plans for her future, including a trip to Hawaii with her sister, tickets to a concert of her favorite band, and other travel plans. Without Brett by her side, she took charge of her life, focusing on healthy eating, exercise, and weight loss. She is in great shape and happy with the positive changes she has made. She recently went shopping with Kathleen and bought a lot of beautiful new clothes, which were still in the bags and with the tags still on at the time of the fire. She hasn't even had a chance to wear them. Those who knew Vashti sensed that something was off. It seemed impossible for her to abandon all her plans so suddenly. Despite feeling depressed, she remained excited and determined to move forward. However, she was unaware that her plans would never come to fruition. Just days before her tragic death, she served Brett with divorce papers, which infuriated him. Shortly after, she passed away. Could this have been mere coincidence? If she was indeed planning a divorce and preparing for a new chapter in her life while intending to raise her children alone, why would she choose to leave this world and abandon her beloved sons? This raised serious concerns for the police. The Kathleen informed police that Brett had consistently threatened his wife with violence and a lengthy divorce process. He had even warned her that he would take their children away if she decided to leave him. Out of fear, Vashti had put up with his behavior for a long time, but she could no longer tolerate living with her abusive husband and wanted to end their marriage as soon as possible. When Brett learned of the impending divorce, he was devastated and canceled a planned vacation with friends. He believed that threatening Vashti with taking away their children was the best way to win her back. He made it clear to her that he would do everything in his power to ensure she never saw her sons again, even if it meant moving them out of the country. This left Vashti very scared. That night, after receiving threats from Brett, she went to visit a friend. She then took the children away so that Brett would have time to think about where he was going. She believed that when she and the children returned, Brett would decide to leave and would not bother her with the children anymore. However, Brett had no intention of leaving. Instead, he was planning something. A few days later, Brett convinced Vashti to talk to him. He tearfully confessed to her that he wanted her to come back and asked for a chance to see the children he missed so much. When she asked why he hadn't moved yet, he replied that he had nowhere to go and asked to stay until he found a new place to live. Vashti was moved by Brett's words. Therefore, she returned home with Brett in the morning, but died that night. Police interviewed a therapist to learn more about the couple's relationship. The therapist revealed that Vashti had recently confided in her about threats from her husband, Brett. Just days before the tragedy, Brett had told Vashti about a dream he had in which he killed her, and he had promised that as a police officer, he could make it look like an accident or that she had left voluntarily. The therapist described Brett as a narcissist with latent psychopathic traits. In that situation, the therapist feared that Brett might harm his wife, and could not accept that Vashti would choose to end her own life. The therapist thought Vashti was too religious to do such a thing and believed that she would never abandon her children to their abusive father. Brett was called in for questioning and was asked directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. He firmly denied any involvement and expressed that Vashti's death had shocked him deeply. He explained that he was struggling to cope, as he was now alone with their children and unsure how to live without his beloved wife. Brett acknowledged that their relationship had faced difficulties. The night before the tragedy, they had discussed their future plans and the possibility of dividing their assets in case of a divorce. He noted that Vashti had been very depressed, and he suggested that their conversation may have caused her to be so distressed that she chose to end her life. He felt guilty, believing that he may have hurt her, which may have contributed to her tragic decision. When asked about threats to Vashti's life, Brett claimed it was just a joke. He admitted that he tried to intimidate her to avoid a divorce, but insisted he would never harm her. When questioned about what might motivate Vashti to set their house on fire, he said she disliked it because they couldn't afford necessary repairs. Throughout the interrogation, Brett acted disrespectfully and aggressively, expressing anger over being questioned about his wife's death. He stated that it was her choice to end her life and that he was in no way responsible for it. Brett's account of the fire and his actions during the time do not match. He said he rushed into the burning room and hugged his bleeding wife in an attempt to save her. However, there was no blood on his clothes or body, and he showed no signs of burns, despite being in the middle of the fire. Shirtless, barefoot, and wearing only pants. It is unlikely that he would not have suffered blisters or singed hair, especially since he walked barefoot through the flames. This suggests that he never actually entered the burning room and was not being truthful about his account. Police suspected Brett of being involved in the crime, but they needed more evidence to arrest him and file charges, so they continued their investigation. Brett's pants, which he was wearing at the time of the fire, were taken for analysis. Tests showed traces of gasoline on the pants, indicating that he likely started the fire. A forensic expert confirmed that Vashti died when the house burned down, contradicting Brett's claim that she started the fire. Firefighters found multiple fires on the second floor of the home, indicating that someone had deliberately set the fire to destroy evidence of the crime. Police discovered that Brett had spent 40 minutes before calling 911, during which time he had taken steps to destroy any evidence. Investigations of his home computer and phone revealed numerous internet searches for how to destroy evidence before the incident. Forensic examinations from Podcherkesk revealed that the notes Vashti left behind were forgeries. The letters were slanted in the opposite direction and the handwriting did not match Vashti's. It is likely that her husband tried to imitate her handwriting but did not do a good job, possibly in a hurry. The test showed that the shot was fired from a point where Vashti could not have shot herself. There were no gunpowder burns on her body. Brett was not initially suspected of murder, so police did not test his hands for gunpowder residue. All the evidence pointed to Brett, and on May 14, 2011, he was arrested. He faces charges of murder, arson, and endangering the lives of children. The trial began only 2 years later. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Brett's guilt. The position of the gun did not match the circumstances. If Vashti had shot herself while lying down, the gun would have been on the floor. If she had shot herself while sitting, the gun should have been to her right side. Instead, it was found under her body with the muzzle pointing down, which was impossible. The bullet's trajectory was also questionable. Achieving that trajectory would require her to bend her arm almost completely and hold it away from her body. The lack of soot and smoke in Vashti's respiratory system and blood indicates that she was dead when the fire started, suggesting that someone else started the fire. During the trial, experts in handwriting, ballistics, and forensic science provided their testimony. There were no witnesses from the defense present in court. Brett denied all allegations, and his lawyer attempted to dispute the evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution argued that Vashti's bedroom was where the crime took place. Brett shot her and then set fire to parts of the house. He got the children out to safety and called 911 from the second floor. The prosecution believed that the motive behind the crime was his refusal to get a divorce and share custody of the children. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Brett Seacat, 37, was convicted on all counts, including first-degree murder, and Brett was sentenced to life in prison, plus 6 years and 3 months, for arson and endangering the lives of children.